Good afternoon and very welcome. On behalf of the EVA Entrepreneurship Academy, I want to welcome to the conference Sustainable Entrepreneurship in the Nordic and Baltic countries. And during this afternoon and tomorrow morning, the Nordic Sustainable Entrepreneurship Network will present results from the project they have been working on that started in the fall of 2021 and concludes these 2 days. In about 30 minutes, you will learn more about the network and what has been done within the network around higher education, entrepreneurship, and sustainability. My name is Magnus Aronsson, and my role here today is to guide us through this afternoon. And for you that don't know me from before, my regular job is to be the managing director of ESPRI, an organization working mainly with dissemination of research on entrepreneurship, innovation, and small businesses. But before we dive into the program, a couple of housekeeping issues. This afternoon will be live streamed, and there's also a photographer here. So if you are, for any reason, not willing to be shown on the live stream or on photography, please let Helene know, and she will work that out. Questions and comments. We will try hard so we can have an interactive afternoon, even if it's a very packed program. And when I open up for questions from the floor, on each seat you have a microphone. You have to use the microphone, and you push the button and then you talk, and keep the button pushed in all the time, because otherwise your insightful comments or questions will not be heard on the recording and on the live stream. And also for those of you that are watching this live, you can use the Q&A function in Zoom, and the questions will be relayed to me. So, without further ado, I have the pleasure to welcome on the screen Professor Colette Henry. Professor Henry is the head of Department of Business Studies at Dundalk Institute of Technology in Ireland and an adjunct professor at Griffith University, Queensland, Australia. She will talk about is entrepreneurship, a solution to sustainability challenges. Colette, the screen is yours.
I have to be honest, when I was asked to talk on the topic of, is entrepreneurship a solution to sustainability challenges, my first thought was, well, yes, absolutely, it is. That's an easy question. But of course, it's not that simple, is it? As we all know, it's a complicated issue. So on reflection, my response is going to be more along the lines of, yes, absolutely, entrepreneurship is a solution to sustainability, but in part, some things need to be done. And in fact, I'd be putting it to you that it's more about entrepreneurship education than it is just about entrepreneurship. So when you talk about entrepreneurship and sustainability, I think the first thing to say is that they're both equally confusing concepts. If I were to ask any of you in the room what your definition of these concepts would be, you'd probably start by drawing something from the literature, and then you'd add your own view, as we'd expect. Entrepreneurship, perhaps we're a little bit more familiar with that. Sustainability, still seen as a relatively new phenomenon. And in fact, in the reports that I've read before this conference related to your project, they all acknowledge the confusion in these areas. So if we can start by just looking very briefly at entrepreneurship, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you what it is, but in my view, I see entrepreneurship as falling into a number of different categories. First of all, you've got the new venture creation approach. That is the standard definition, activity that involves discovery, evaluation, and exploitation of opportunities, all geared toward new venture creation. So this is approach, it's quite traditional, but it focuses on some sort of business entity being created at the end of it. And then, sticking with the commercialization view of entrepreneurship, there's this notion that the entrepreneurship can be taught. So it can be taught approach. And we've all been used to that in recent years. So again, it's sticking with the commercialization aspect, but it's looking at entrepreneurship from the point of view of something that is a skill set that anyone can learn. But again, the end product tends to be some sort of business entity. And then there's what we like to call the competency approach. And this is where the European Commission has come in a number of years ago and told us all that everyone needs to learn about entrepreneurship. It's a skill set for life. It's something that will be applicable, regardless of your particular profession at the end of the day. And then there's what I like to call the order approach. That's where you have the vision to recognize opportunity where other people just see chaos or contradiction and confusion. And I think that particular definition fits very well with sustainability, because sometimes that agenda can be very confusing. But I also like it too because it fits with my own view of entrepreneurship. And not to overcomplicate things, this is my view of entrepreneurship. It's a blank page. It's at the beginning. So that process when you're starting something, when it's all a bit confusing and there's a bit of chaos and no one can quite figure out what to do. Entrepreneurship is when you can actually start to put some shape on that. And again, I think that marries well with the concept of sustainability, because it is quite a complex agenda. So if we look briefly at sustainability, again, we all have our own definition. The standard one that we've seen in the last decade or so has been all about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In other words, we need to be mindful of resources. We don't want to totally ruin the planet, and we want to make sure that people can continue after we're gone. That particular definition immediately links you to things like climate change. So that can be a little bit restrictive. And then from a theoretical point of view in the academic literature, you've got the 3 pillars approach, this notion that if you've got an economic aspect, a social aspect, and an environmental or ecological aspect, then, you're addressing sustainability. Sure, isn't that brilliant? And that's something I think that social enterprise opened the door for a number of years ago. And then we've got the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of them. And whilst they are a really good framework, they can be very confusing. And they're confusing because they can be quite high level and sometimes feel a little bit out of reach. So we've all seen this diagram before, 17 sustainable goals. Some of them immediately link to entrepreneurship, things like decent work, economic growth, industry innovation, sustainable cities. They all resonate with us if we're talking about entrepreneurship. And some of the others have a more indirect link, things like partnerships for the goals, quality education, gender equality, and reduced inequalities. So if we work hard, we can probably tie them into entrepreneurship. But the problem with them being off-putting is that, in principle, the SDGs address the high-level world problems, those wicked problems that are really difficult to deal with. And that can be a problem if you're trying to introduce them into entrepreneurship education, for example, because a student is liable to think, well, what can I do to solve world poverty or, address the goal of zero hunger? That is way outside my reach. So just like entrepreneurship itself, the Sustainable Development Goals need to be broken down into bite-sized problems and first dealt with at the regional and local level before we can get people to start thinking about them at the global level. So for me, and this is where entrepreneurship education comes in, for me, in the context of sustainability, entrepreneurship education offers a huge opportunity. I think in entrepreneurship education, we're already a little bit ahead of the curve. We have for years been working in partnership. We've been promoting the notion of working with internal and external stakeholders. We've been looking at new pedagogies, new assessments, and also pushing this notion of co-creation, and doing that at an international level. And when you think of it, those are all key components of successful sustainability projects. So for me, entrepreneurship education offers an empowerment opportunity, an opportunity to be creative, to take control, to work with others and generate something of value, even if it's not a new enterprise, to solve problems. I think entrepreneurship educators have a very powerful mandate to influence young minds. And when you think of it, entrepreneurship educators were given that mandate when the concept of the entrepreneurial university was first introduced. And there was a challenge then to drive the entrepreneurship agenda outside of the business school and into STEM disciplines. And we'll all remember how difficult that was. So why not extend those efforts to the sustainability agenda? I think when delivered through education, we can present entrepreneurship in the way that it was intended, so that it should be a possibility for many and not just a privilege for few. Sustainability affects everyone. So if we want the discipline of entrepreneurship to remain vibrant and up to date, just like any discipline, and not become defunct in a few years, we need to stay in touch with the real world phenomenon and use entrepreneurship to understand that and to solve the problems associated with it. Sustainability deals with real world phenomenon, and there are lots of problems associated with it. So sustainability presents itself as an opportunity to raise entrepreneurship as a discipline to the next level, to add diversity, and to reinvigorate it by doing something good. So to me, there's a real opportunity to introduce and indeed welcome sustainability into the entrepreneurship education curricula. Now, it just struck me that Morris and Karatko suggest that it takes about 4 different types of business to make up an entrepreneurial economy or an entrepreneurial society. And they talk about things like survival businesses and lifestyle types, managed growth businesses and aggressive growth businesses. For me, sustainability would put an entirely new spin on survival businesses, because sustainability is all about survival into the future. But how exactly do we welcome sustainability into the curriculum? And I know some of us have been doing it for a while, but to really give it the attention it needs and move to the next level. Now, at the practice level, I've seen in the guidebook that you've prepared in association with this conference that there is already some excellent examples of sustainability projects on the ground. But I think we've got to remember that not all universities will be at the same level. Not all organizations will have had this conference, will have had this project. So if we're serious about integrating sustainability into the entrepreneurship education curriculum, then I think we need to share knowledge and learning, of course, but there needs to be some serious structural changes. So what's needed? What do we need to do? Well, I think here I'm going to borrow from some of the things that we did when we were trying to bring new things into the entrepreneurship education curriculum. So, as I mentioned earlier, when we were trying to address the challenge of being an entrepreneurial university, trying to extend entrepreneurship beyond the realms of the business discipline. So, we need a degree of leadership. We have to secure support from the very top. And we know that that's not easy. This is a high-level agenda, and it needs high-level buy-in. We very possibly have to redefine the purpose of entrepreneurship education, illustrating that it's got a role to play, not just across all disciplines, and it's not just about starting a new venture. It has a real role to play in sustainability by solving problems. We have to try and confront these taken for granted views. We're going to have to identify appropriate assessment approaches, and maybe even design some new ones to fit the sustainability agenda. We've got to move beyond the stereotypical view of the entrepreneur as commercializer toward that of entrepreneur as problem solver. And we need to reconceptualize the role of the entrepreneurship educator. So let's reimagine ourselves not as experts, but as what I like to call aggregators of content. We're going to be a bit like a Netflix or an Amazon Plus. We're gathering up all the relevant expertise across disciplines to address the sustainability agenda. And that's going to mean more co-creation. That's going to mean more working in partnerships, more liaising with stakeholders. But to be fair, entrepreneurship as a discipline has probably been doing that a lot more than some other disciplines. We also need to evoke student curiosity, enthuse and excite students to solve world problems. And we can do that by focusing our student assessments on real sustainability issues, develop partnerships external to the organisation, work across geographic regions, but most importantly, break down those big, wicked problems into small local problems and start there so that they're much more manageable for students. And the other thing we need to do is identify appropriate pedagogies and maybe even design new ones. Use challenge-based and entrepreneurial learning, experiential learning, to draw on models such as EntreComp and GreenComp to identify new sustainability competencies that students are going to need, because we're moving beyond the entrepreneurial skills into the sustainability ones. And this will help them solve sustainability issues for their future. So finally, I want to leave you just with a very simple question, maybe to reflect on over the next day or two as you meet people and network. And I was inspired to present this question by a great academic, now sadly departed, Alistair Anderson. Many of you will know him. And when we would be talking about social enterprise or sustainability, he would just raise a very simple point. And he would say, why don't you just say to your students, that business idea, that's all very well, that looks wonderful, very creative, but what exactly are you going to do to make this place a better world today? And he would say that in a lovely accent and put the student on the spot. So what I'm saying to you is perhaps over the next day or so, just ask yourself, what one even small thing can you do in your professional role or in your personal role as a human being to help address some of the world's sustainability challenges, and remembering that it might just be a very small start. So I'm going to leave it there and hand back to you, Magnus.
Thank you very much, Colette, for those insightful comments and reflections upon the topic. Then, of course, I have to ask you, so what are the small steps you're doing today then to answer your question?
Oh, thank you, Magnus. I can always rely on you to turn the tables. I think for me, it's first of all, even just reflecting on the agenda, even just to ask yourself the question, what do I think sustainability means? And even, a simple thing at home, you're recycling, that can be a very simple thing, but if everyone stopped doing that, the world would be in a very difficult position. And in the workplace, what I'm trying to do is to try and get all of our lecturers who work in entrepreneurship education to make their assignments all about sustainability, to look at the sustainable development goals, to look at renewables, to look at recycling, and just to try and make those the topics for student projects.
Okay. I want to, anyone that has want to take the opportunity to ask Colette a question before we move on in the program? Yes. Please introduce yourself and yes, go ahead.
Okay. I'm Anmar Kamal Al-Din, a postdoc at Chalmers University of Technology. I'm focusing on sustainable entrepreneurship and innovation with a particular focus on the role of university in driving sustainability. Thanks for a very inspiring presentation. Just like a quick reflection about taking the small steps and the small role, and that's nice, and but also a question that I keep thinking about is that I read a few days ago actually that there are 100 companies in the world that are responsible for a significant amount of pollution in the world. So basically, if you take care of these 100 companies, now I don't remember the percentage of the pollution, but it will solve a huge part of the environmental crisis. It makes me think that any step that we take is some sort of like a teaspoon. Okay, they are important, and of course everyone has to contribute, but how to deal with these systemic issues when the world leaders are barely taking any steps towards sustainability? What are your reflections on that?
Okay, so thanks for the question, and that is a big one. I mean, you're correct. Small steps will only get us so far, but you've also got the multiplier effect there. So if everyone is making small steps around the world, that can have a huge impact. I think if I can bring it into the context of entrepreneurship education, the notion that there are these 100 companies in the world, and you're absolutely right, contributing to many of the big issues we face today, including pollution. I think there's a great opportunity in entrepreneurship education to let the higher level students deal with those big problems. The master's level students, let's get case studies going. Let's get talking to the companies, bring the people into the classroom, and get the students through their research to put these points to these key companies. And you'd be amazed at how much they can actually influence change. So I think the smaller steps to introduce the agenda, because it is still very, very new to many, and those bigger ticket items, I think, can be dealt with at the master's level, the higher level students, as students gain more confidence in the sustainability agenda.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for a very good question and sort of comments. And thank you so very much, Colette. We have, unfortunately, need to move on in the program. So thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you.
Now it's time to welcome up on stage Johan Karlstedt. He's the Director for Innovation and Entrepreneurship here at IVA. Johan, the stage is yours.
Thank you. And so lovely to have you all here. Fantastic. In fact, the person that should stand here today and welcome you to the Royal Academy of Engineering Sciences was Tuula Theri, the president of IVA. And as you all can recognize, I'm not Tuula Theri. I'm definitely not president of IVA. But unfortunately, she had an acute visit to the dentist this morning. And that was the problem, really. But she sends her the very, very best. She hopes we all have fantastic days at IVA. And she's very interested to learn what we have learned from each other after 2 days here. So that's a message from Tuula Theri. Oops, sorry. Yeah. But where are we then at the Royal Academy of Engineering Sciences? This room, this building, has in fact been a meeting place to create the future, for Sweden anyway, and perhaps in Europe sometimes, for more than 100 years. IVA was established in 1919. So we are on very historical ground. And I think that's fantastic and right ground to be at for our subject today. IVA likes to be the bridge between business, academia, policy making, and everything. Get people together, people that want to change the world, make some difference, to have common knowledge how to make the next step in different ways. We have 1,300 fellows in various fields in engineering and economics at IVA. And we have a business council with 250 businesses in Sweden. And of course, we have a student council. That's very important. In fact, you're going to meet the chairman of the student council later on today. So that's the main part of IVA. And of course, we integrate with other businesses, researchers and everything, politicians in Europe or in Sweden. But we focus on 4 areas at IVA since 2019, when we celebrated 100 years. Of course, it's innovation and entrepreneurship, but it's also climate, resources and energy. Education and research is very important as well, as you know, and people, technology and society in different ways, with sustainable cities and digitalization in agencies and so forth. And in 2019, we also started an initiative that we called the Entrepreneurship Academy. And I think that's not the first time, I'm sure of it, because IVA has been here for 100 years, more than that. But really focus on entrepreneurship. And we work in 3 areas, and I was going to tell you this, because I hope we continue working together in different ways. We focus on the art of entrepreneurship. How can we help entrepreneurs, the coming entrepreneurs, to have the right skills for the future? We focus on entrepreneurship culture in Sweden and in Europe. And then we talk about attitudes. And I think it's so important also that policymakers, politicians know more about the possibilities with entrepreneurship and how important it is for our society, definitely up in the north. And we also focus in the 3rd area on the climate of entrepreneurship. And that means that we want to improve the legal and structural conditions for the entrepreneurs of the future. What hinder do we need to approach to make entrepreneurship easier, and also that entrepreneurs can meet the societal challenges we have in different ways? And when we do this work, we really want to work with everyone. It's an open platform. Really want to have everyone engaged in what we do regarding entrepreneurship. And we also say that we never work alone. We always work with partners in different ways, like NordSEnt is fantastic. And we work through others. We support good initiatives to be even more successful. That's one part that we work as well. And so the art of entrepreneurship, we talk about, in our case anyway, the ability to identify business or opportunity-based possibilities around us. How can we increase that ability more? And also, I think that's very important in Sweden, the ability to take this possibility, the opportunities, into commercial or utilization, action in different ways. And how can we work with the ability also to form, lead, and develop organizations in the future? So that's a focus we have right here. And what we're doing right now on the Entrepreneurship Academy, that's so good. But we have a work in entrepreneurship education. We want to see entrepreneurship education flourish and be a part, and everybody should be able to take part of it throughout the whole educational systems in different ways in Sweden. And of course, entrepreneurship, that's so important for our businesses in all our countries, that we get entrepreneurship into the business. And that's why we're so happy to have you all here, to engage in the work that we're doing on entrepreneurship and sustainability in this conference. And I really do believe that together we can make the important difference and change. And I really look forward to the coming days. What can we learn from each other? And what is the next step? And to help us, to guide us through the days, you already met him. We have engaged Magnus Aronsson, CEO of Esprit, an old friend of mine. In fact, we know each other for many, many years. We live not next door to each other, but very close to each other in Täby, north of Stockholm. So Magnus, I welcome you once again up on stage. Please guide us through those 2 days. Very welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Johan. And what Johan didn't say, that we've known each other longer than any one of us would like to admit, because that would just tell us and everybody else how old we are getting. Let's move on to the next part of the program, and it's time for us to learn more about the Nordic Sustainable Entrepreneurship Network and what they've done. So please welcome up on stage Emily Norman. Emily is the head of research analysis and higher education at the Danish Foundation for Entrepreneurship. Emily, the stage is yours.
Tak, Magnus.
Thank you, Anna.
Okay. Well, tak. It's so nice to see all of you, and thank you, Johan, for hosting us here in these wonderful premises in EVA. EVA is one of the partners in the NordSEnt project. And thank you also to Colette for providing a really, I think, insightful framing of the topics that we're going to discuss today and tomorrow. Yes, as I said, my name is Emilie Norman. I represent the partner in the project called the Danish Foundation for Entrepreneurship. We are the Danish National Knowledge Center for Entrepreneurship. And we have for over 10 years as well been working with the topic of also SDG entrepreneurship. Before I joined the foundation, I worked in an organization called Climate Kick, which is an EIT-funded organization where I was director of our entrepreneurship programs within climate change. And I think it was very clear back then, it was almost 400 partners across European universities, higher education institutions, corporates, cities, that we can only solve the issues of climate change in partnerships. And I think the question that was asked from Chalmers just before, how can small enterprises really make a difference? And they can, but they really make a real difference when they partner up with the whole value chain. Because transformative entrepreneurship, value chain entrepreneurship, pushing for change is hard to do as a small enterprise as well. And that's why both education, as Colette says, it's so critical, but it's also the mindset and how we really support entrepreneurs. And I think higher education institutes has a critical role to play. And I think also that was what the Nordic Council of Ministers saw. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the project and the background for the NordSEnt project. It stands for Nordic Sustainability Entrepreneurship Network. We responded to a call from the Nordic Council of Ministers, a Nordpus call back in the spring of 2021. And formed the network. So the network didn't exist before then. We came together in August. We've been working now for a year. And today we have the final conference where we also produced this book, which Colette mentioned it a few times, this guidebook, and you can find it in the lobby after my presentation in the coffee break. I'm just going to tell you about the highlights from this report because this has been a final deliverable. So a great thank you for the Council of Ministers to support this partnership, but also a really great thank you to all of the partners. So I'm just speaking here on their behalf. It's the Estonian Business School, where we have Marge. I think, Marge, would you stand up? I know you're here in the room. Representing the Estonian Business School. Welcome. We have the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering and Science. We met them, Johan and Helene, who are here from EVA. We have the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, NTNU, who are here as well today. The Copenhagen Business School, so the two partners from Denmark, and I think they are here, or they will join. Yes, great. And then the Aarhus University, where we have Helle and Jeppe will come later, and then the Danish Foundation for Entrepreneurship. So we have 4 countries represented in the partnership who've been working sort of quite intensely for the last year to achieve, I think, a number of things, or to work on a number of things that was part of the mandate set by the Nordic Council of Ministers. They really wanted to have a look into what does Estonian or Nordic sustainable entrepreneurship look like? What do we know? What's being offered at the higher education institutes? We did a mapping already back in 2020 in Denmark, where we tried to look into what's being offered across the higher education institutes in Denmark in the topic of sustainability and entrepreneurship. And we mapped over 200 both courses and programs, but also incubator activities, hubs across the universities, strategies as well. So clearly, and all of this, I think, was news to the whole ecosystem around the universities. What are actually happening there? A rich and intense portfolio of activities is being unfolded. So we wanted to look into that. We wanted to try and map what's going on in the region that we represent. We also wanted to enhance collaboration. So as I said, this network doesn't exist. After August this month, when we will report back to Nordplus, we will in theory cease to exist. But that's part of what we want to discuss with you in these next 2 days. Is there an opportunity to maybe continue the collaboration? So that I put it to you, and maybe one of the questions Colette asked you all, what can you do? Maybe there's something to be inspired by and continue. We have been organizing 2 workshops in the partner countries, and with the partners, we had one in Denmark in October, and then we had one in Norway in April this year, which has also been open, and they've been live streamed as we do today. There's a website, a NordSEnt website, where there's a link here. You can find much more information about kind of the reports we've been doing, the activities. It's also a little bit of a knowledge repository, and we hope to keep the website live. And then finally, we produced this guidebook, which is a collection of cases, of programs, initiatives across the Nordic and in Estonia as well. So really, it's 17 initiatives described in detail, plus a really substantial annex where you can find even more links to initiatives. And it's anything from full programs, full bachelor programs, 180 ACTS, to courses, to hackathons, to study tours, to climate clubs, to incubator activities. So it shows that the topic of sustainability and what role entrepreneurship plays is really rich, and it's addressed in a lot of different ways. We also wanted to make the report very hands-on for you all, so we've been trying to sort of bring out what's the lessons learned, what has been the successes, what's the tips and tricks, what's the methodology, what's the tools that have been applied. So dive into it and use it as a knowledge repository. I'm not going to into so much about the concept because I think it's been covered well by Colette. But when we talk about sustainable entrepreneurship, of course there are a lot of terms being used. I think a lot of you who've been working in this field for a lot of time think it's called green entrepreneurship, climate entrepreneurship, SDG startup, impact entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship. They all encompass parts of what we talk about when we talk about a green transition, when we talk about sustainability, when we address the SDGs, or it's a more narrow approach looking at iværksætteri or sort of startups. It's central to entrepreneurship that it represents some sort of value creation. And I specifically talk about entrepreneurship and not about startups because in the notion of entrepreneurship, it's wider than just having a commercial value. It's really creating value across society. In the Danish Foundation for Entrepreneurship, as part of the mapping we did 2 years ago, we then defined sustainable entrepreneurship, this combination as when innovative skills, business skills, and entrepreneurial competences go hand in hand with green and sustainable values. That is when sustainability is included in one, several, or all processes of the entrepreneurial venture. Because we definitely see applications and ideas and solutions who maybe just have a little circular aspect in terms of maybe how they transport their product. It could also be an element of how they get rid of disposal or how they reuse material. But it's also the full value chain of application and address our behavior, our mindset, our consumption patterns as well. So it's really rich. And we also have these definitions included in the report. I think a lot of you are here because you work with entrepreneurship education. And I think the latest sort of framework for understanding green mindset and green skills necessary to be a key player in the green transition, in the sustainable transition, was the Green Comp framework that came out from the Commission, from the JRC, early this year. I think it's the latest and most comprehensive framework for those of us who've been working with sustainability and the frameworks and taxonomies around entrepreneurship, but who also needed a framework that could integrate what is then to work in an entrepreneurial way around a green transition. And the new framework, the Entrecomp, has these 4 competence areas where the focus is on embodying sustainability values, embracing complexity in sustainability, envisioning sustainable futures, and acting for sustainability. And each of those 4 areas include 3 competences. And I think a lot of you already know the Green Comp framework, but it's pretty much those, in total 12 different areas and competences are illustrated here. And I think that addresses one of the questions, that what we want to teach, what we want to work with our students, both in education and in the incubators, is this really broad mindset that's different from normal entrepreneurship. Because they can only make a difference if we take climate change as the key challenge and not creating a venture. They can only create a difference around climate change if they have this really wide notion. So it's putting a lot of work on the students, but it's also putting a lot of work on us as institutions to facilitate that. And I think the learnings we've had and the recommendations that we've been formulating is this, that if higher education institutions in Europe is going to play a critical role around sustainability and the green transformation, and supporting students and programs in playing a critical role, they need to work on a number of levels. And we have identified 17 recommendations. It's quite a lot of recommendations. Normally you had 5 or 10, but we thought, okay, it's a complex issue, and I think 17 recommendations reflect that we need to work on so many levels. We try to group them in recommendations for the institutional level, so the more strategic recommendations, and then the more practical recommendations for academia and for educators. And I'm going to run through them very quickly, but as again, you can find them in this report, so I really encourage you to take it. So if we look at the recommendations at the institutional level, first of all, there's a huge momentum at the moment. There's a lot of funds going into the green transformation. There's a big focus on what role can our knowledge institutions play. So it's about including sustainable entrepreneurship in the strategic work and the kind of the framing and the framework contracts that we as universities engage in. And it's also embracing the passion, the need to make a difference that we see in young talents and young students at the moment. Secondly, it's about communication visibility. We found out that when we did this mapping, that there are a lot of courses, but it's not always clear that what is being offered is actually there. So when you read the websites of the universities, if you read at course descriptions, even if you read the learning goals, they may not say very clearly that this is all about sustainability. So make it clear, communicate what it is that is included in the course, and make sure that everybody can see it. The strategic focus. In the Danish Foundation for Entrepreneurship, we have been increasingly focused on, if we want entrepreneurial universities, we need to have institutional strategies for doing that. It's really all well if we have these grassroots educators who offer fantastic courses, but we can only move the university sector forward as entrepreneurial institutions with strategies. And it's the same thing with sustainable goals within entrepreneurship. So develop strategies, very key sort of KPI-driven strategies for your work on entrepreneurship and sustainability. Collaboration and partnerships, both internally, so across faculty, across institutes, between education and between the incubators. Look at what you can do on the co-curricular level, and of course externally as well. Clearly, and a lot of you who work with entrepreneurship has experience in doing that, the more you work with the private sector, with municipality, with sort of the ecosystem around yourself, the more you allow students to be part of partnerships where they can test the ideas, the more value you can create. And at the institutional level, the 6th recommendation is the focus on this interdisciplinarity. It's a key part of entrepreneurship in general, and it's even more critical if we're trying to address climate change and sustainability. So, moving a little bit away from knowledge-based teaching to team-based teaching. That's also one of the examples you can see in the booklet, that we have, the more you can work as a team across educators, the more value you can create. So, then we actually have 11 recommendations, and they're a little bit overlapping with what we've seen before for the academia and for educators. Again, cross-disciplinarity and prevalence, that is really key. Entrepreneurship and sustainability competencies should really be included in a curricula. You should set up ways where your educators can work together, ways where you can collaborate with students across faculties and also across universities in partnership. Integrate sustainability in the program. It's clearly the more you integrate it, for instance, working with what are the skills to learn, what are the competencies, take as a starting point the new Green Comp, make it as clear and also making the learning goals as clear as possible into curriculum. So it's not just an element in itself, but it's something that embeds the learning either in a semester or in a summer school. Make it as close to practice as possible. The more action-orientated, more close to real innovation it is, the more exciting it is for the students. address research. There's a whole field within itself, typically in a very siloed higher education institutions, where research is something that takes place, maybe not so integrated with either education or the incubation hubs. And we see numerous times that the more integration you have there, and the more the funds that you apply within sustainability, the more you can link your entrepreneurship work to that, not just as a kind of an end activity, but something that's integrated in the beginning, the more value you get. New and better quality teaching material. In the foundation, we did a study last year in December, and we found the feedback was that in order to teach and work with sustainability and entrepreneurship, we need updated material. Learning by doing, again, a little bit the same as before. Practical assignments, experimental gaming, anything you can use that make the teaching as practical as possible, and in partnership with the industries that enhances the learning. Role model, outside work, get them involved in the teaching, get them involved in the hub activities, get them to use their climate sort of challenges as cases for the students. The students' awareness, the climate awareness, the need to make a difference, the climate consciousness, the climate nervousness can be addressed through action. New collaboration internally for educators and teaching. There is a lot of skills and knowledge. Clearly, that's when we bring out these examples. How can you make them work together for you in your education? The complex issues, acknowledge that it is complex, and see how you can navigate and set some useful frameworks around that complexity. Finally, diversity on a lot of levels. We know that complex societal wicked problems can only be solved by complex teams, by diverse teams. That's what knowledge and research shows us time and time again. We also know that female students correspond or relate very clearly to societal challenges and to climate change. So the more team that you have that has this, the likelihood of getting more females into the space of entrepreneurship, which I think is a Nordic challenge in general, the more female students you attract as well. And finally, the last recommendation, bridge building. It's clear for us who work with entrepreneurship that the sooner we start an education system, the more critical and the more sort of attuned students we get later on. So start early, and let's try to bring bridge building as well within the education system from elementary school up through higher education around sustainability, because they also work with sustainability in elementary school. And let's try to make their pathway through the education system as seamless as possible. So the final remarks for us in the NordSEnt project is that clearly the courses that we've seen, we have developed the narrative around these 17 examples, but the annexes give you many, many more examples. So there's rich and diverse and really inspiring material out there to be inspired by. It also shows that sustainable entrepreneurship is critical and a growing field within higher education institutions. We all know that who are here. We can also see there's some valuable learnings in this region, in the Nordic region and in the Baltic regions that can be taken up in the rest of Europe. We think that this development and this knowledge is important to continue to support. As I mentioned, we will be handing in our final sort of deliverable report to the Nordic Council Ministers at the end of August. But we hope that maybe something can come out of these 2 days, because clearly the knowledge sharing and the collaboration needs to go on, and hopefully also reach out to the wider ecosystem around us. So with that, I just want to thank you, and I look forward to the next discussions.
Thank you. Time for one question from the floor, if there's someone that want to ask Emily a question or a comment, or everything is clear, still clear. I just have one short question then. Of the 17 recommendations, which is the most important one according to you?
I actually think it's the ones related to the institutional level, because we have found increasingly if higher education institutions are going to take this forward and support whatever goes on in their ecosystem internally, it needs to be a strategic choice. So I think the recommendation around putting in place strategic framework and support for sustainable entrepreneurship is critical, I think, to have an integrated, and for all this to actually happen, the other 16.
Okay. Thank you very much. We are rushing forward, and now we have a session where we had 3 different cases from the report, and we'll learn more about them momentarily. And after each of the presentations, I will open up for questions to think about what they're saying, if you want to ask them something to learn more about what they have been talked about. And I will be sort of the timekeeper here, quite harsh on that, unfortunately. First out is Helle Mayborn Fargeman from the Center for Educational Development, Aarhus University, and she will talk about Build a Sustainable Startup workshop as part of the Toolbox series at the kitchen at Aarhus University. Helle, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for letting me come here and present this small initiative we've been running in the kitchen, which is the incubator of the Aarhus University. Well, one of the incubators, but the biggest one, and open both to academic employees as well as students. So this small workshop, we can probably call it a bit of a prototype, is something that we've tested out recently, and will probably be sort of further developing during the next semester. So very, very shortly, it's a 3-hour standalone workshop, but part of a series of workshops that we've called Toolbox. It's open, of course, to the members of the incubator, both employees as well as students, but also other students and employees at the university, as well as external. So it's a rather broad audience, you could say. When we decided that we were going to do something in the field of sustainability and test something out, we were a little unsure, should we go for a standalone workshop focusing completely on sustainability, or did we want to sort of create some small nuggets that we could integrate in other workshops that we're offering in the incubator? And we sat down and looked up the pros and cons. Doing one workshop would hopefully give a sharp focus on sustainability, some motivated participants that really came for the agenda of sustainability. But also it would be maybe difficult to do some parallels to other sort of more classical entrepreneurial disciplines. And maybe we would also see some people missing out on this, we think, important agenda if we did it like that. So we were also considering, should we do some nuggets of sustainability? We'd probably think, well, that's going to give us maybe some better integration with other disciplines and reaching out to some more participants. But then maybe also we would have people coming, well, we didn't come for sustainability. And it was probably also more complicated to develop all these small nuggets. So that's why we ended up saying, okay, this is a test, so we were going to go for this one workshop firstly, and then we're probably going to do some nuggets later on. I mean, talking about impact when we're talking about a 3-hour workshop is probably pushing a little far. But if we are to do that still, we probably would like to see some more motivation to work with sustainability among our members, even if they actually didn't start up a business just to sort of push the sustainability agenda forwards. And then hopefully also some participants feeling a little more competent actually working with this element as well, maybe even feeling a little higher level of self-efficacy. So how can we sort of tell if that happens? It's only a couple of months ago since we did the workshop, so seeing long-term sort of impact is probably still kind of difficult. But we decided that we at least would try to see if, okay, can we see the participant actively engaging with the tools that we provided at the workshop. We didn't have a whole lot of participants, but we can maybe, well, if we are to sort of try to group them a little bit, we would probably say that we had some participants, primarily those that actually are working on a startup some of them quite far ahead, some of them with quite sort of initial ideas, that they seem to find it quite relevant. Those that just came because they were kind of curious didn't participate that much, even though we actually offered a case that they could work with. And then we experienced some special challenges when we had a few participants that were planning to do startups that maybe would like to either create some kind of license or actually sell a startup quite early on in the entrepreneurial journey. Yeah. So the content was these 5 elements. So of course, a general introduction to the concept of sustainability, talking about several bottom lines, different kinds of value, the SDGs, and so on. Then we provided a case, so another member of the incubator. And then we offered 2 tools. So the triple-layered business model canvas, building on the business model canvas, that most of us probably know from Osterwalder, and then the abundance cycle canvas. And then finally, we finished up by talking a bit and discussing the sort of challenge of communicating about sustainability. This balance between not claiming too much, but not either falling in sort of the other pitfall, saying too little, promising too little. Yeah. Quite a lot of you might be familiar with this already, but we use the triple-layered business model canvas as one tool that we offered for the participants to test out during the workshop, based on the business model canvas and the triple bottom line thinking. We decided to have a sort of an alternative for our participants, primarily for those who might be working on business ideas and businesses that were further developed, where the sort of idea is that you probably already have some kind of a running business, where you can sort of tweak a lot of different parts of a business. So we offer these 2 tools in order to have some sort of similar approach. So both of them are working with this concept of several bottom lines, several types of value, including the economic one. And then not having too much focus on calculations and measurements. But as I said, there are also some differences. One of them are probably most suitable if you have an up and running business versus if you are working on a very sort of initial startup idea. And also, the abundance cycle canvas is primarily probably useful if you want to do several small initiatives. So trying to sort of improve on a lot of different measures. Whereas the triple-layered business model canvas is most suitable if you want to have sort of one initiative on maybe the 3 different bottom lines. Yes, this was actually a short introduction to our little initiative in Aarhus.
Thank you very much. Please stay.
Yes.
You set a good example of keeping on time. Hope that everybody else will follow. Think about any questions. We have some time for that. But so how are you taking this forward?
Yes. This was, as I said, the very, very early test with relatively few participants. So we're going to, with some iteration, test it out this autumn again. But then I think we'll, from that, move into a process of maybe seeing if we can actually sort of cut this up and create these nuggets where we probably have some more experience and then maybe integrate it in some other workshops that we're offering.
Okay. Yes. You use the microphone at your chair.
Hello. I'm a former student from Aarhus University, Jannike Borg, and I am now an entrepreneur. Just one question.
Keep the microphone closer to your...
sorry.
mouth. Thank you.
How are you learning about sustainability? Are you actually taking in external competences in order to develop this, or are you using the competences broadly in the university to actually create the right tool set and workshop?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So one thing we are doing is that we are so lucky that we have an alumni from our incubator that is actually running a sort of a sustainability consultancy, and they are they're involved in both developing the workshop and also delivering it. But there are definitely also some internal competences from different departments and so on, and that's something that we would also like to do. We haven't done that yet, but that's definitely something we're looking into as well. Yeah.
Any more questions, comments? Everything is crystal clear? So what else, just a short, what else do you do around sustainability within this?
In the incubator?
In the kitchen.
In the kitchen, yeah. Well, we have some different sort of startup competitions that has also been focusing on the sort of the agenda of sustainability in cooperation, for instance, with NordSEnt, which is a music festival that also has some kind of sustainability approach. So we are trying to sort of integrate this into several of our activities, and probably more to come, I would.
And what are the biggest challenges in doing that?
I mean, I also do some. These activities are extracurricular, but I also do some curricular teaching, and there I think we see a tendency that a lot of young students, and maybe as Emilie was mentioning, a lot of female young students are quite interested into this agenda. But I mean, when we move to the extracurricular activities, we could maybe have even more startups, potential startups that were interested in this agenda. I would say.
Okay, we have time for one quick question over there. Yes, please.
Interesting talk, but one question: can you formulate learning outcomes, or do you do that before going into this, or is that implicit? I mean, or
typically in our workshops we don't have sort of explicit learning goals. That doesn't mean that we don't sort of consider it, but we don't have these formal learning goals in these kinds of activities. Well, I guess we want a bit more of an informal setting, and where we also have the sort of the flexibility of sort of tweaking the workshop depending on which students and which startups actually show up. But it's definitely something that, I mean, we could consider if that could be a good. We have a explanation about what the students and the employees can expect from participating. So I guess it's kind of maybe an informal kind of formulating some learning goals still. Yeah.
Well, thank you. With that, we're moving on. And I forgot for a previous speaker that I had also an obligation to hand out a small gift from the organizers, the Entrepreneurship Academy, and this is some not only food for thought, some chocolate.
Great, thank you so much.
Another thing about this comes from Åre chokladfabrik, and it's about 10 kilometers from where I grew up. So it's, but I didn't choose it. There we go. Well, we're moving on. Now, from Aarhus University, we will now travel to Copenhagen Business School. And the next case covers two practices at Copenhagen Business School. First out is Lavinia Christina Losif Lazar. She's the program manager at the Principles for Responsible Management Education at CBS. And her presentation is about illustrating green and sustainable themes in management of higher education and implications for future curriculum development. The floor is yours for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't need this. It's only one slide, so okay. That's very quick. Thank you so much. Just thank you for having me here. Thank you for the introduction. It's wonderful to be in Stockholm for the first time ever. Just full disclosure, I'm recovering from a week of COVID, so if I don't make any sense about halfway through, that's why. Not because of this. This is a project or a case that came from a need, both internal need, but also we have seen specifically for this an external need to know. An external need to know what's happening in our courses, in our curriculum at CBS regarding specifically green themes and green transition. We have looked internally at what's covered from the SDG perspective, but then the external interest came on the green, specifically the green themes. And what we did was we took our data, which is course descriptions, learning objectives, and competency profiles, what we have, sort of standardized at CBS. We've looked at keywords according to those 7 themes, and we've coded them accordingly according to what we found in our content analysis tool. We used in Vivo in this case. We searched for relevant content. The relevant content was uncoded, and then we arrived at that picture after a week of constant looking at things. And this is an as-is picture at that time in curriculum at CBS. This is one program. And what we did was we showed this to our external stakeholders, but also we show it internally to the programs. And this is a tool that could help them start a debate. Is our entrepreneurship program, it's not an entrepreneurship program, but if it were, is our entrepreneurship program hitting the themes that we want it to hit? Is it encompassing those themes? If it's not, why not? What do we want to do more on? Also, it can inform other internal stakeholders, which is student organizations, other initiatives at CBS, to maybe focus on the extracurricular activities in something that is not necessarily addressed in the courses and in the programs. And maybe the programs themselves can start thinking at what they want to encompass, what they want to develop more in, going in the future. And of course, we can do this again, and we can see if there's a development in one way or another. I'm not sure if how I'm on time.
I'll let you know if you have
okay, thank you. And then from the overview that we can see in our programs, we can better inform then society, policymakers, our ministry, for example, who asked for this type of overview to be sent to them. So we hope we want to create that overview for one moment in time that we hope will produce changes along the way as it progresses, as more need for knowledge, for knowing what's in the curriculum comes in. Yeah, I think that's me. Thank you.
We'll come back with some questions to you, but first let me ask up on stage also Malte Werner. He's the president of the Copenhagen Business School Climate Club, and he's going to talk, you guessed right, about the Climate Club.
A few things on what we do and who we are. We are actually a student-driven organization, which was founded because we wanted to put more focus on how we do business and how we do sustainable business. So how can we integrate sustainability in how we think business, both academically but also practically. It was founded in 2018 around these pillars, which I think very closely relate to how we do entrepreneurship as well, particularly the sustainable business angle to this. And I think we've done some pretty cool stuff, particularly in how we've lobbied CBS to push the agenda, both within the formal institutions, so how we can integrate it into education, but also by investing in our members, to become the leaders of tomorrow. And that's, for instance, with training, like innovation training and connecting people with great ideas so that we can kind of recombine knowledge and create innovation and entrepreneurship like that. And then I like this whole leadership experience that you get, because it's a non-profit organization, which means that basically you teach or you practice what I call leadership without authority, which I think is really valuable for the entrepreneur who have to manage all the trade-offs in lack of resources at the early stages. And a few insights in, I've written a case as well, so you can read a little bit more about what we do. But I think the really interesting stuff is about how do you do it. The why and the what, everybody are usually good at talking about that, but the how is really challenging. And first thing I would say is you should probably be very agile in your mindset. And that's also a buzzword. But by that, I mean your purpose will change all the time. The topic evolves so rapidly that what you think you might be doing today can be completely different 1 year from now. So you have to really revert back to, why am I doing this? Quite frequently, I would say. And then when you do this, I would also say have some good experiences with diversifying your set of skills. I think that's also a classic entrepreneurial guideline. So you have someone who are really good at these formal things and leader, and some are very good with leadership, and some are very good with the people, to supplement each other. And then I'd say one crucial element to running something that can kind of nurture sustainable entrepreneurship like this is that you make it a social thing. Because people might join for a purpose, but they stay because they like to be there. So keep that in mind and facilitate it also in the formal way you do things. And then in doing voluntary work where you don't pay people, then you really have to understand the value proposition, because you're constantly matching, like, where do you get the funding and what am I actually giving to the members? And I think that obviously social is a good thing, but also concrete skills that you can take on to be a good entrepreneur. And also address free riding in your formal institutions, which means that sometimes it can be quite a challenge to motivate people to work. So I think that there are some good, if you kind of address what's the requirements quite comprehensively in your formal institutions, then you can revert back to that, and no one will ever really question why you do what you do as a leader. And the last point I put up here is seek feedback as a leader, which is also say find out who's the most important ones to get feedback from, because people also tend to overdo that a little bit. So if you I'd also say you probably learn how to seek feedback as a leader. And those are just a few brief words, but you can read more about it in the case, and we can chat if you would like to. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Please take a stand over there at that table, so we'll think about questions. And I have two short ones. First, to Malte, what proportion of the student body or the student at the CBS are engaged in the Climate Club?
In Climate Club, we are
5,
roughly,
10, 15%?
I'd say if we get close to 1%, we're doing pretty well. I think we have 40 active members, but that's also because you have to actively work within one of the work streams to be a part of the organization. Okay. But for our events, when it's not COVID, of course, then we can engage quite a large proportion of the school.
because that's what I want to cover. How many of the others that are not sort of actively involved? How many, if you would make a guess of the students going to CBS, how many has been involved in some way?
In some way.
Climate Club?
Yeah, I'd say we're still low in the single-digit percentages, unfortunately. But I can see that there's a huge difference in what it was when we founded CBS Climate Club a couple of years ago.
Okay, and to Lavina, Christina, you made this mapping.
Yes.
What was the sort of did it show what you expected in terms of sustainability content in the courses? Because that was not really clear in, maybe it's in the case, but sort of what's the outcome of it?
Yeah. So it's I didn't show it here because I hope it's also in the case, but and it's here it's presented only one program. So we did this across CBS for all programs. 38 plus master programs, 18 plus bachelor programs, plus MBA, and so on. And it showed, we could look at the themes. The themes were given to us. We didn't come up with those. But the green themes, we could see which ones were the most approached or focused or discussed, or at least explicitly mentioned in the data that we have, and which weren't that much. And of course, there's when you're at a business school, you expect that some would be more focused on than others, more technical ones. But it gave an interesting overview and a starting point of discussion to see, okay, so our stakeholders are interested in these themes. We are at this stage at the moment. Where do we want to be? How do we want to get there and include and make it more explicit, actually? Because I think the interesting part of this is not necessarily that it shows, we're not doing that much, or we're doing a lot. Does it really reflect what the faculty, the study board, the students actually think that it reflects, or that the program is doing? Because that's where the discussions come up. It's like, but we thought we were doing a lot more. Why doesn't it show?
Right.
Or, this is lovely to see. We're doing a lot, and we're very explicit on this theme. So it's hopefully it will lead. This is just the first iteration, but hopefully we'll see some changes. Then we'll have a lot more to discuss, and also inform you guys for future events and how to engage student study boards as well.
Any questions, or please introduce yourself as well. Anders. And you have to press the...
Anders. Yeah. No, I'm a former president of the Royal Institute of Technology, so that's a long time ago. I'm quite interested in this climate club. I mean, I've seen those, at quite a few universities. I mean, how do you when you talk about this in management, how do you handle politics? I mean, policies, which is that part of the management, or you ignore that most of the things are really dependent on politicians' decision?
Thank you. I think that's a really good question. Actually, being a student of politics, that is really interesting. And this actually is something that has been quite a salient issue in how we do all our activities. And I think it has evolved, because our initial standing point was that we wouldn't really talk that much about politics, because we thought it was simply too controversial. And you kind of risk positioning yourself politically in the spectrum in a different place than people you actually want to influence. So that's kind of been why we've been resilient in talking about politics. But I mean, we do all acknowledge the importance of political action.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to just stay there. I'm going to come here, and then...
One more.
Oh, I see. This is really nice. It's raspberry, blueberry, and blackcurrant. You can share with everybody else during the coffee break, maybe. I don't know. Oh, well, one more question. Well,
yes, I'm
okay,
Birte Lund, and I'm sorry I was a bit slow, but you said it was important to understand your value propositions, and for me, value proposition is very relevant when it comes to sustainability, and you can't ignore it. It's a huge political field, so I can't understand how you could give that answer.
Yeah. So, sorry, what is the question?
That you said that it was a touchy area to talk about politics, but you said that understanding your value proposition, it was written on your screen that it was an important aspect.
Yeah.
So I see it like there was some contradiction between what you said and what was on your PowerPoint.
If I understand your question correctly, it's about how I understand this value proposition that you offer as a student organization. And it is a challenge to balance both how you fund a student organization like that and how you motivate people. And I think that is developing all the time. Pre-COVID and post-COVID, the firms that fund these activities, they look for different things. And I think that's really important. That's the one side of it. And then you could call it the supply side. And then you have like a demand side on how do you then, what do you give to the members? What's the value proposition for them? Because, okay, we can offer a course on sustainable business in 2019, but that's already outdated by 2020. So that's really the challenge I see in understanding the value propositions in two ways.
Well, thank you very much. We have to move on in the program. Please keep your questions for later. And yes, without further ado, we're going to travel north. Thank you very much. Yes, from Copenhagen Business School, we now has come time to go to Chalmers in Gothenburg, and Professor Tobias Fredberg, he's a professor at the Division for Entrepreneurship and Strategy at Chalmers, and the director of the Center for Higher Ambition. Sounds interesting. And he will tell us about the Chalmers Entrepreneurship School.
Very good, thank you. So thank you for having me. Thank you for interesting talks before. So Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship is a 2-year master's program. And we have 3 streams, so I'm going directly into it, and I'm trying to make sense of why we do what we do, and end up why I think it's important. So bear with me, I'll just take you through it. So we have actually 3 tracks at the program. It's a 2-year program, as I said, where the second year is for what we call the core track and the tech track, a project year. So students work with entrepreneurial projects, either startups or internally in large corporations for 10 months. While they do that, they write their master's thesis, which is an analysis of the entrepreneurial environment in these companies that they analyze as they progress with their different projects. So ICM is called Intellectual Capital Management, is more around licensing, patenting, all the things that had to do with the intellectual property, which I'm not going to go into very much at my talk here. So what we do really is that we have a lot of students that work in teams on what they do. And the main thing that we try to convey to them is that really what we try to focus on is value creation, not only for yourself, but for others. So how do you manage these kinds of stakeholder relationships in multiple different ways? So those can be, of course, your founders, your people that provide you with capital, but internally in large corporations, of course, you have multiple different stakeholders, as do the large corporations themselves. We think that it's extremely necessary to work in teams, and that the teams and how they relate to these stakeholders is absolutely critical for the success of these different initiatives or ventures, if you want to. So we put together the teams first and then allocate them to different ventures secondly. It should be said that the students can bring in initiatives, but they aren't allowed to work on those entrepreneurial ideas that they bring in. Then somebody else will work on them. Because we try to detach the entrepreneurial activity from the actual entrepreneurial idea. What happens in the process is that they get really, it's really key to be able to handle this kind of uncertainty that pops up. And what we try to do in the process of these 10 months is really to provide them with the tools of trying to handle that uncertainty. If that is anything very, not perhaps simple, but basic as project budgeting, it helps them to get some kind of understanding of what the project is about. But it can, of course, be politics, internal politics in large corporations. If you are to have a workshop with a lot of big bosses, you will be nervous about that. How do you handle that kind of situation? How do you deal when somebody tries to strike down on you? So, we have everything from startups here. Andreas has a tough time right now because he's driving a company in the Ukraine called Beetroot. They're IT consultancy. Now the people of Beetroot are just being spread over. Some of them are in Poland, some are in Moldova, some are in Sweden. Andreas, I think, is in Sweden right now. We have Andrea, who's on the top there. She drove a project at Eton trying to come up with how you could produce a high-end sustainable shirt, non-cotton shirt. It failed miserably, I'm afraid. They tried to come up with it again, and we have multiple different initiatives of different kinds that these students drive. Now, yeah. The question, of course, that comes up is why we do this. So, stealing this image from Banksy, you have, of course, an inner drive to have something that motivates you from the kind of legacy you leave, or the right thing to do, right? But you can, of course, think about the value creation for yourself and for others as a very instrumental tool to be able to be richer. And if for large corporations, of course, that can be a similar thing. And what we try to deal with, what we try to talk about, is if there is a difference, and if we think that there is a difference, if that matters, right? It doesn't matter if we take it as a moral requirement or we just see it as a tool for creating something else. Like people clearly have different stances on this issue. And the reason why we try to discuss these issues is really to help students develop some kind of some kind of professional judgment. Because as the world progresses, as we take on complex problems, people need to develop that skill. People need to become more better at handling these things. So we really try to create a high-tension system where things are really tricky to handle. And we try to support the students along the way. And this comes up if you deal with issues of sustainability, of course, but also other kinds of value creation. And here's why I think this is really relevant. So my thing, I'm head of the corporate entrepreneurship track. So I deal with large corporations and the internal ventures in them. But it's equally relevant, of course, for how we deal with things in society. If we just look at how different driving forces put pressure on organizations and society at large, they come from a different couple of places, right? One of the things is that do we as consumers or as businesses buying business things for others, do we prioritize sustainable products and services? Well, to some extent, yes, right? But not as much as we would hope, right? Because everybody of us, we stand in the grocery shop when we have a fixed budget. And we try to deal with whether we should buy the eco-friendly cucumber or the not so, right? And we try to measure these things off. So we see actually less effect on this. The more effect we see on the financial markets and the pressure that are put on if you get a financing from a venture capital firm or from a pension fund or from a bank or whatever, they put pressure on you because they have pressure on themselves. But really, I think, and this is what we need to take on as a community, is the pressure from students that take jobs at these different companies. And that I think, with the way I read the data, is this is where the major pressure comes from. Now, the interesting thing about that is that if we look at, there is this assumption that millennials have more focus on sustainability than my generation X, for example. Well, I see very little data actually to prove that. There's much more to say that the focus on sustainability is much more a part of where you are in your life situation when you're in the mid-20s, perhaps no car, no job, no job, no house, for example, no kids or whatever. And that, but still, that's something that we need to take care of. And the interesting thing that I don't have a graph on is the way I understand the data is that the most talented students are actually even more focused on sustainability than the average students. And the way I also read the data is that companies that will come into that are more and more reliant on these really talented students, because in a world which is very focused, we're very characterized by complexity and multiple different pressures on these companies, there are fewer and fewer that can handle that complexity. So McKinsey came up with this a couple of years ago, that where they, don't ask me how they exactly measured it, but they came to the conclusion that in a high complexity environment, the difference between the high performers and the average performers is just huge, right? And if we then believe that the world is more characterized by complexity, we need to help students handle these kinds of things to be able to perform. And if we then believe that we have the most really talented students, we also need to help them get focused both on the sustainability issue and the complexity issue to prevail in what they do. And I think they can be a force for good then in society. I hope you agree. Good, thank you. Did I exceed my 10 minutes?
Yeah, thank you, Tobias. One question to you. In your three sort of streams or parts of the entrepreneurship school at Chalmers,
yep.
How, over the last few years, how have you incorporated more sustainability issues, or are you doing that?
Oh, absolutely we are. Well, maybe this is, we can start here. So when we recruit projects into the program, what we try to involve the students in how they evaluate these ideas that come in. Both the ideas that come from the corporate side and the ideas that come from what we call idea providers. And we do that, we help the students with a toolbox. Now it's formalized into a course. But we help them, it's called the idea evaluation course, where they try to look at those ideas from a market perspective. Will anybody buy this? From a technological perspective, is this feasible to do? From an organizational perspective, do we have the resources at hand to be able to pull this off? And of course, a social and sustainability perspective. So we try to provide them with these tools, and as they try to bring in, for example, company projects, we try to have them focused on that. So we have a constant discussion around it.
And has that been part of the sustainability social sort of component in evaluating? Has that been in place? When did you sort of put that into the evaluation?
It has been growing in, okay. I have to say. So we formalized it more and more into also this course in the last couple of years. If you take Andrea's example at Eton Shirts, she was there 2013, 2014. 14, 15, sorry. Okay. It's been going on for quite some time.
Any questions, comments to Tobias?
I was speeding up, so sorry.
Anders?
I hope that wasn't too quick.
I mean, just curious, I mean, my impression is that the universities of technology have been not very good at this. I mean, in the past, while I mean business schools have been using case studies as much more as a part of the education, both I mean existing case studies and new ones. I mean, in the end, is that true or?
I think to some extent, I think that's true. But at the same time, I think this entrepreneurial value set that has to, build it, and the quality criteria is if it functions, right? If it works, then that's a good thing. So I think that kind of attitude fits very well into an entrepreneurial venture, right? We build it, does it function? That's a good thing. That's a quality criteria that we can put up on it. It's also, I mean, what happens here is that you make it all experience-based, right? And you try to teach people while they do that. And my opinion right now, coming from a business school, that was my background, you're much more inclined to put yourself and look on what happens and then analyze it as very, very externalized. from what's going on. Whereas here, of course, these people jump right into it and try to deal with all the issues that pop up. Does it make sense?
Yeah. If you look at the full curriculum you have, if you look at the full curriculum you have, how much time does this take up? I mean, is it whole of it? Is it 50% or is it
You mean the project?
Yeah, the projects.
It's the whole second year.
It's the whole second year?
Yeah.
Okay.
So and what we do is that we have every Friday, they need to be at Chalmers, and we have workshops. And what was nice about that we bring in the perspectives from all the different ventures or initiatives, and we try to discuss those while discussing some idea. I work with strategy and structure, so we discuss those different things around strategy and structure with all the impressions from the different initiatives. The same thing when it comes to change or when it comes to leadership or whatever. Right? Mm.
So, thank you very much, Tobias.
Thank you.
If you have some more questions, Tobias will be on a panel later, so there's actually more opportunities to ask questions to him. And he's a PhD student and junior research fellow at the European Business School in Estonia. And he will talk about, as you can see there, the green stream, embedding sustainability in an entrepreneurship program. Jim, the floor is yours.
Okay, so my name is Jim and I'm from Estonian Business School, and I'm going to talk a little bit of a follow-up of what we did in Denmark in October last year. So in October last year, we actually got invited by CBS and CSE, and we got to present our entrepreneurship program. And we came with the question to that particular workshop: how can we integrate sustainability into this program? Because it was, yes, a topic that we have been talking about, but we wanted to do it in a more coherent way, in a way that actually would make sense to our students. So for those that were not there, very, very shortly about our program, what makes it so special is we don't teach any courses, we don't teach any subjects. What we do is we teach stream-based, meaning every semester has a particular topic. In our case, it's the life cycle of a business. And then we teach topics about law and ethics. We teach topics about entrepreneurship, obviously, marketing, organizational, and management. So we have these streams, and that gave us an opening because we already had these great streams. And spoiler alert, yes, our best practice is the sustainability or the green stream. So because we had these streams and we had the semesters with the topics ready, we asked you for a lot of input. I'm not going to read it all out, but these were all the great input that we got from the workshop in Denmark. All the semesters were actually analyzed by all these great experts that are sitting here, and we got a lot of ideas from it. Actually, it made our Christmas break very, very short. I think it was good that Christmas was in the weekend, because we had then the time to actually think out this first pilot of the green stream for both the second semester and the fourth semester, as we only have two cohorts at the moment. So, building the green stream. This is how we build our program. We take a whiteboard. I'm the not so environmental friendly or sustainable person. I like Post-its, but I promise I will move to the whiteboard more and more often. And we just went and took all these topics that we got, all these ideas that we had, and we looked at the 6 semesters and put them there in the right place. So now we have this stream, but we would like to test it out. First, we actually started with the students to shape it a little bit around. We started with the students saying, like, okay, why are we even talking about this topic right now? Why should this be part of your program? We are entrepreneurship in the digital era. Why would we add this extra flavor to the mix? I think it's very similar to the question raised by the first presenter of today, the why question. Why is this even something that we should do? Because on the one hand, it is logic. It is talking about these very big challenges that we have. On the other hand, we have first year, second year bachelor students that are trying out their first business, which is already scary and difficult enough. And then now you want to add on top of that the sustainability. So what we did and why we put it into a separate stream, the green stream, is we embedded it in the entrepreneurial mindset. So rather than treating sustainability as a separate topic, it became part of all these other mindset areas that we really like to develop in our students throughout this program. We also made them look, rather than thinking about this as a big challenge, into the way that how can you turn this into an opportunity? Some of them took this very literal and tried to immediately make money out of green ideas. Others saw the higher philosophical question there and actually first thought about, okay, challenges can be turned into opportunities anyway. So based upon your input and also our in-house expertise, as well as the great network that Estonian Business School has, we had the pilot materials ready and the lesson plans were created to embed this immediately in the second and the fourth semester. Why this sustainability as a separate stream, and why not integrating it into other streams? Well, for us, it made it easier to spotlight this theme, but also to attract those people from the outside that actually we wanted to teach, to come to our program and to inspire our students. One thing what we really noticed during the pilot of this stream over the last semester was that it made a lot of sense to involve even more practitioners than we already did. So we teamed up with Cleantech Estonia. They are actually the Estonian partner in the Climate Kick, which was also something mentioned before. A foundation called Stories for Impact, and also, excuse my Estonian pronunciation, it's Rohe Tiger, which is Green Tiger. And all these three partners, they came to our classroom with very different kind of angles. So Cleantech, they are an incubator, and they're talking a lot about green from the start, so green business models, etc., etc. They helped our students to understand that, hey, actually from day one, I can have this in my business idea, in my organization that I'm building up, rather than later on trying to reverse engineer it. Green Tiger, on the other hand, was a little bit later on in the process. There we were talking already about larger organizations that are further in their development, but would still like to focus and have this focus of sustainability and green. So some very initial results from our pilot here with the sustainability or the green stream. What we saw is that those second-year students who were actually already pretty far along with their business ideas, two teams actually realized we have been doing something wrong. We've been focusing up on the wrong thing, and actually they went back to their original business idea, rewrote their original business plan, which was pretty much the whole work that they had done in their first year in, what is it, less than 2 months, and they focused completely from their original business idea towards sustainability, to having this as now their base of their foundation. And I can, with a lot of confidence, say that one of the teams will be extremely successful if they continue their journey. With the first cohort, the first year cohort, my apologies, 3 out of the 5 teams that were on the beginning of their journey, they decided, okay, we can actually benefit from this green and also a slightly more social way of doing entrepreneurship. They had this green mindset, and we recently graded their reports, and they had a very strong focus upon what is this business idea about and how can we help this, with this green mindset, our ideas along. So what do I have planned over the summer? Because summer vacation also got a lot shorter, not only because of the green stream, but because we are also developing our last year. We actually decided, based upon this pilot, yes, this green stream needs the attention. It deserves the place in our program. And the question was raised, what is the small little step that you can do after today? I think we are going to rename our program into entrepreneurship, not only in the digital era, but also in the sustainability era, because I think it should even have an even more wider focus within our education. But on top of that, we also started to develop all these lesson plans and materials. And this is something that we're very willing to share in the future once we have tested them and improved them further. Because of the structure of our program, where each semester deals with a particular topic, we have lesson plans, materials that can help you with business idea generation and sustainability. building an organization and sustainability, making sure that we can actually spread this knowledge out. So that is our best practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Besides sort of ruining your Christmas holiday and now the summer vacation, what has been the biggest challenges with implementing the green stream into sort of ongoing curriculum and ongoing sort of?
I think it was in-house expertise. So yes, we are slowly moving towards there, but Estonia is a little bit behind in this whole sustainability transition. So finding in-house expertise to actually come and give us the right knowledge. And secondly, not wanting to kill the first business ideas that our students have, because it's this journey that they're on. And we have, for example, one team that really wants to sell very specific old race cars, and they're all petrol, they're all terrible for the environment. But I can see the passion within that team, and I don't want to kill them by saying, okay, you can only be green. But at the same time, I do know that if I look at the future, it's not a sustainable business idea in both kind of ways.
Let's open up for, were you wanted to, Alte, please use the microphone.
Yes, thank you. I think the last comment was interesting, actually. Let's take the example of the entrepreneurs who want to sell old cars. Wouldn't you say you could actually kind of do them a favor to kill it now, and rather than wait for them to find out?
Okay, so this is a very good question. And there's two ways of thinking here, right? My job as an educator within the university is not to tell somebody what is a good business idea or not. My job is to develop this mindset, to make sure that they spot the right opportunities. So I would rather much for them to go through this journey, get there, to really develop that passion, because they have so much passion in that idea. And if I would kill it right now, I'm not so sure if they actually end their journey at the university completely at that moment, or if they will recover from that by the time it's time to write their final thesis. If you ask me as a person, so I'm taking my educator hat off, yes, I would rather much kill it right now and tell them go and work on something different.
Well, it could be a good business for them for 5-10 years. I mean, there always want people that want to work with old cars and so forth. So, well, but maybe not from a sustainability point of view.
Exactly, definitely.
From a business point of view, it could be good. Yes, another question?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask if when you were killing the ideas or not, or you want them to develop the idea until they realize that it has to die, do you provide them with a safe space to fail in their ideas?
Yes. Well, so as it's not part of our program to actually fund their business ideas or things like that. So they're responsible for that. Of course, there's a network. We have incubators in the building, etc., etc. But from day one, the most important thing that we tell them is that you're going to fail anyway. So why be afraid of that? And this is also coming back to that mindset that we try to incorporate in our program very much. Don't be afraid of failure. If you don't try, you never know. So please go for it. But it doesn't mean that if you come with a very terrible business idea to me, that you get automatically a bad grade and you will not pass a semester. That's not the goal of the program.
We have time for one more question. Yes?
It's a stupid question. When you make hydrogen, I mean, you can make red hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and green hydrogen. If you look at your green stream, when you look at the business cases, are there certain of them that are greener than others? I mean, do they all? What's the definition of green in this case?
What's the definition of green? You mean regarding the business ideas of my students? Oh, that's actually for them to figure out, and for them to argue in the way that they could pitch it to me, and also build beyond that the justification why this is green.
How often do you react to what is?
So this is my pet peeve, or actually the most difficult for me, because once again, I'm sitting on my chair on the one hand as a potential investor, on the other hand as an educator. I try not to react based upon the business idea that they present during the grading period. However, I have taken now 3 teams under my wing as a mentor, and there I can tell them straight to their face that what they're doing is not the way how they should be doing business.
Well, with that, thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
We're going to go over here. There you go. Thank you very much. And we're moving now to our final case of the afternoon. And we'll go to the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, or NTNU, Schools of Entrepreneurship, which is the case is about. So it will be presented by Signe Buhl. Signe is a sustainability coordinator at the Department of Industrial Economics at NTNU. The floor is yours, Signe.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here today, and I'm looking forward to tell you about NTNU School of Entrepreneurship and how we implement sustainability within this master level venture creating program. So this has been a master program since 2003, actually inspired from Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship. And every year we take up 40 students with different backgrounds and a big range of professions. So it could be all from nurses to engineers to journalists, etc. And then the overall visions with this school is to create the world's best business developers. And with this, we mean that it's not the ventures that comes out of the program that is what is the most valuable part. It's more the individualists and how people are able to use the entrepreneurial mindset, even though what kind of work they're going to do afterwards. But the major thing at this school, it's about learning by doing, as we have talked about many times before. And here the students will feel this from the totally beginning, because the first semester they're doing this course called Idea Search and Market Assessment, where they have to do 5 feasibility studies within 4 months. So every second week you have to test a business idea with a predefined group. So it can be an idea that you brought in for yourself, or taking from an extern, or that it comes up due to the week because you find out that the first idea was you just need to kill it immediately, and then you'll need to find out a new one. And then after 4 days of calling experts and trying to sort out if this is a business case that is worth continuing working with, or if you should just kill it, then you need to present it for the rest of the class, because you're doing this feasibility study for the whole class. And then there will be a panel, and it could consist of investors, entrepreneurs, people from the faculty. That will give you also feedback and recommendations on behalf of the founds that you have made. So this is all done to identify business cases that are worth working with from already the second semester. So the students have to test ideas, but also test each other's, because in December they need to find people that they collaborate with, and they need to choose a business case that they will continue working on throughout the whole study, so for 1.5 years. If it fails, it fails. But you need to do this continuously while having the curriculum about entrepreneurship. Oh, that was the wrong button. So the frameworks that we are working with within the feasibility studies, it's kind of flexible because we want the students to decide themselves what is the most valuable part in a business case. But there is some few mandatory areas to be covered, as for example the problem statement and the description of the innovation, etc. But then within the last 4 or 5 years, sustainability have also been one of these mandatory areas to be covered. But here we haven't decided what is sustainability. It's not written anywhere. So the students have to take the discussions within the teams and find out what is sustainability and how do we have an impact, either if it's positive or negative, in terms of this business case that we are testing out. And I say we because I'm a student myself and I have gone through this. So I know what it feels like to sit there and 11 in the evening, you need to present it next day, and what do we actually think about this? It's a lot of thoughts to handle. But some of the major success factors of this study is the enormous student engagement, both between the students that are active now and the former students. We have a well-established network with alumni where people are good at sharing knowledge and helping each other. There's a mentor ordning there. And then, of course, the big autonomy and ownership you get because you need to work with a business case from the totally beginning. And nobody tells you what is right and wrong. You need to find out yourself and to evaluate this entrepreneurial mindset. So this is spread out to Norway. Actually, this summer, they will start 2 new venture creating programs inspired from the Entrepreneur School, both in Bodø and in Oslo. So it's really exciting to follow up on. But there's still room for development. Now I've written the students' psychosocial health. This first semester is kind of tough for many students. There's a big pressure. And since it's a sustainability workshop we are having here today, I want to ask, is this even sustainable? Yeah, but it's also because, how should you weight this? What is most important? Should we make the push? Should we be the people that pushes the students so they feel what they can meet on the other side? Or should we try to give more helping hands and lift up instead? And it's a big question. I don't know what is right and wrong, but it's worth to take aware of. And then there is the paradox of valuation. And we have already talked about it before. This cited here, it was Google. I Googled it this morning. So a business valuation is the process of determining the economic value of a business. But I was thinking there was like 3 areas that we need to cover. There was the economic, and then the social, and then environmental. So where are they in this business evaluation? I feel that we need to start discussing this even more than we do today, because a business case, what is a good business case? What is the most important factors? So I think we need to change the view that is today, that it's not only about creating the biggest revenue, it's also about making an impact in other fields. So I have asked this question, is it the economic or is it more direct sustainable impact? And that's a question I also would like to ask you about. And it's really interesting to take this also in terms of the School of Entrepreneurship, because here it said everything is possible, and it's really cool to get that told, because you believe in yourself and you can do whatever. But at the same time, people say it's really hard to earn money on sustainability. So why should you even try? You are here to make a business. So this is conflicting. And both cases are true, but how do we handle it? How do we motivate people to actually make a sustainable business, even though it's hard? And that was all for me.
Any questions, comments to Anders?
I'm just curious. I mean, you had 40 seats available. Is there a competition for these 40, or do you have to go downtown Trondheim to bring them up to the...
Yeah, now there is a competition. So I think this summer there have been 450 that have applied. So there's like a process of applying itself, and it's not about your grades, not at all. You need to have the motivation. And then 120 has been chosen out for an interview, and then out of these, they choose around 35 to 40 students.
What's the opinion of Norwegian industry? Do they look upon this as a good move, or do you look upon it as a diversion from reality?
I think it's a good move, but I also think that School of Entrepreneurship are really good at cooperating with the industry. We also have events where the industry is coming and showing some of their problematics, and then students are working specifically with these cases. So there's a good relationship.
Yes. You have the microphone on your right-hand side.
Sure. I want to respond to your question. What if I said that it's not impossible in the future to earn money if you're not sustainable? What do you say then?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, but it's still hard to start on because people want to act sustainable, but as I don't remember who talked about the cucumber, you always take the cheapest option, at least, not always, but it's really hard to sell the sustainable part sometimes.
Well, I mean, to this question, in 1975, I mean, Linköping University, where I was there, started the first industrial economy master program in Sweden, and it took about 15 years before it was fully accepted by industry. And today, I mean, 50% of the CEOs in Swedish industry are coming from industrial economy. So, I mean, I think sustainability may have a good chance to get there too. I mean, but it will take a bit of force and, yeah.
Malte.
Thank you. You talked about how the students are supposed to define how their ideas are sustainable. Do you guide them in doing that, or how do you address that?
Nope. And there's actually not really any lectures about it as well. There is maybe 2 lectures due to a semester where it's guest lectures that are coming in, and we had one about circular economy. But it's really open. Most of the part it goes on the environmental, what the students present as the sustainability area.
Yes.
The program you made is kind of a spin-off of what I would frame as a bureaucracy. Like you see a big corporation, and you are an internal spin-off in that bureaucracy. How are you experiencing that bureaucracy reacting to what you have actually done? Obviously, you have had some kind of accept for this to run, successfully, but what are your experience? Because I think a lot of people here could actually learn something about that.
I'm not quite sure if I answered right, but I think this part about it's a set period where you're forced to do this. And then the faculty have made that pressure, and they are the one that force you, and they are the one that says, but if you don't have anything, you need to sit here some more hours to make it done. And it's quite a hard pressure. But when you have chosen a team and you have chosen an idea, then the whole faculty will rather help you. And then it will be way more of a discussion, and then you can see that you learned actually quite a lot in that half year. So there's like these 2 parts, and you know that the second part is coming. Yeah, I think that helps a lot of people at the study.
One thought in my mind is that you mentioned that your program is open for students from any kind of background. It could be
if they have a bachelor.
If they have a bachelor, but in any topic,
area.
Subject, any area.
Yeah.
So, how does that affect did that mean that you bring in so many different more perspectives around sustainability, for instance? Is that something that you have experienced in this?
Yeah.
Given that you have this really diverse pool of talent, so to speak.
Exactly. And that's also the idea of taking at that range of people. But the funny part is, even though it's said that now you're all different and you need to learn from each other, then there will always be the people that speak loudest. And there is kind of an unspoken box that you need to follow anyway. And so we need to empower the people that actually want to fight with these problems and act sustainable, because they might not be the one that yell loudest, but they still have really, really important factors within the whole.
Okay, with that, thank you very much. And there you go. I'm going to move this box. Here. So, now, I think we're going to do an exercise that you just make a very short break in here. You can stand up, but you can't leave your seat. Okay. And while you do that, I'm going to ask the first panel to join me on stage. And I'll make the introductions when they're up here. So Lovisa, Kristina, Tobias, Jeppe, and Christian, please. So, to end the afternoon, we have 2 panels, and I hope, and we'll see if we're going to accomplish that we'll be able to address some of the issues that have been talked earlier today. And on stage for the first panel, this is my challenge to go from right to left. And first we have Lovisa Berglund. She's a master student at Chalmers, member of IVA's Student Council. And then we have Kristina Esop from the Estonian Business School. And before joining ESB, she worked for 7 years as the CEO for the Network Responsible Business Forum Estonia. Then we have Christian Ryen. He's the co-founder and COO of Farem Biotech, and also been working before co-founding that company with big companies around sustainability issues. And then we have Jeppe Dørup Olesen. He's head of innovation at Aarhus University. And Tobias, you met before, so I'm not going to spend any time on introducing him. So, in this panel, I've asked the panelists to have the impossible task of, in 2 minutes each, address 2 questions, but they can choose what they want to talk about for those 2 minutes. It's still a democracy. And the 2 questions are, which activities and education initiatives are the most successful in integrating entrepreneurship and sustainability into university programs? And self-promotion is allowed. And are there any tips and tricks that universities can use to increase their focus on entrepreneurship and sustainability? We'll touch upon some of these topics before, but this is a way to set the stage. And then we'll open up for dialogue and questions, and I invite all of you, and also those that are still joining us online, if they have some questions, please use the Q&A function in Zoom. So, we'll start from here.
Yes. Am I close enough to the microphone? Yes, it's very hard to stay within 2 minutes, but for me as a young person, it feels like we are on a sinking boat when we're talking about sustainability. And there's a big hole in the boat, and we're asking ourselves if we maybe, while the boat is sinking, maybe we should investigate how the boat is sinking. What happens if we don't do anything? When will the boat be drowned? And I get the impression that we need to educate young people to fix the boat. But when the boat is sinking, maybe that's not the top priority. Maybe we should try to fix the boat and then educate, or do it at the same time at least. So I think the activities who are the most successful are the ones who sticks. We're very good at bringing from policies and documents. It says that we are very good at sustainability, but maybe it doesn't get into the action part. And I would say, as a Chalmers student, that I think the entrepreneurship school is a very good example of something that makes real impact. Thank you.
And you're done. Amazing. Less than 2 minutes. Yes, Kristina.
Okay. Thank you for the floor. I thought about the questions, and I thought I cannot begin without, in my opinion, one of the most crucial topics, which is management culture. And it's the same for companies and universities. I like the definition, sustainability, the ability to sustain life, because we talk about what are the outcomes of entrepreneurship, but at the same time, when people don't come up with, I don't know, very grand startup ideas, at the same time, we also have to deal with our everyday life. Some of the mega trends, like technical revolutions, they have also brought us some really crucial problems, like our mental health. going far away from natural living, which is like, how do we actually create a culture in entrepreneurship and in universities that actually promote natural and healthy life, that we are examples as entrepreneurs, but we are also self-sufficient, naturally living individuals, whatever roles we take. And when we leave a university, we know how to do that. I would hope that it would also come a lot earlier than in university, but I think that the whole school system plays a huge part in this. Not only promoting successful outcomes as an entrepreneur, but how do you actually represent the kind of person who in its everyday networks also is building itself a life that is satisfactory, and that is not like draining mentally, not oriented towards excess competition. I don't know, at the same time when building a business, contributing to overconsumption and production, all this. So I would bring out management culture as one of the most important topics the companies and the universities should address all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Christian.
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I have my business is sustainability. We work with water treatment, so for me it's been easy to work with sustainability from the start. But trying to apply my experience from building a company from scratch, I wanted to talk about the 3 pillars, but we have talked about the 3 pillars today. So I was thinking about, okay, what is really the key? And I want to go a little bit on Tobias. He was mentioning uncertainty, and I think we really need to focus on the ability of the individual to investigate uncertainty, and that could be economical uncertainty, sustainability, or economical, environment, and social uncertainties. Because there's also a saying that you can't out-train a bad diet, so we really need to take sustainability from the core. And this could be from both an individual level, and what I mean with that is that we can't solve all the challenges as individuals. We can work on our strengths, but as an entrepreneur, I really think that targeting uncertainties, targeting and finding economical and social ways of making business is really the key, and that is what we need to focus on already from the universities. So, thank you.
Okay, great. Jeppe,
all right,
you're next up.
Yes. So on this question on how can we get sustainable entrepreneurship into education, I'll take a more organizational point of view. And let me just start by saying I think it's, as was mentioned earlier this morning, founding in strategy is massively important. It really gives us goals and clear headway to run on. One of the obstacles that we always find is that structures or incentives or sort of the economic model doesn't really fit. And but the strategy helps in that way, and we might as well get the self-promoting part over with. So we've actually done that strategy, and that's been a big help for us in building out more sustainable, more entrepreneurship activities at the university. At the same time, we do look with envy actually at Chalmers University and also at NTNU for a full master's program on entrepreneurship, and I hope that's one of our goals for the future at least. One of the other things that we think is really important and it's going to push this agenda is to invite companies, NGOs, invite public institutions in to bring some of those problems that they're working on, because it will really give students sort of a sensation of that they're working on real problems that matter for people out in the world or companies in the world. I think that's also a great driver in pushing sort of the whole sustainability and the whole entrepreneurship agenda forward. Finally, on tips and tricks, I think one thing that we've learned works very well is that it's a big organization, as most universities are, and we've come to find that one of the best ways to push this agenda forward is actually identifying champions. So people, professors, lecturers, or people who work in companies, invite them in, help us push the agenda forward, because one thing is the students or employees that are really themselves driving towards starting a business. But a lot of other students and also employees, they're thinking about it, they don't know where to go, they don't know what to do with it. But push from champions or push from professors or push from other students that have done it has really been a great vehicle for change.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Tobias.
All right, thank you. So a couple of years back, we did a study, and it was not on ventures, it was on large corporations. And we were asking people that were named as high potentials. People thought that it would end up in the executive management team of these large corporations within the next 5 to 10 years. And we were asking these people, so how do you learn the best? And so the answer was not unanimous, of course, but most of them said, well, I learn the best if somebody gives me a real thick challenge that I have no clue how to solve, but I'm supported while I try to do it. And so we tried to set up what we have at the School of Entrepreneurship. A lot of the things that we've been trying to do are along the same lines. So, and what that means is that you put people in challenges and you create a really high tension system. And it's very emotional. So we need to take in the emotional side of what it means to drive something, because it comes from within, right? It comes from your internal motivation where you try to do it. But then you need systems to back people up in a different way. So it's a very different model than what we traditionally do at universities, where we learn the model first and we apply it second, right? Here, we try to do the stuff. And to do the stuff, we need to learn how to deal with different things. And I think that's really key. I think we could expand this. So if we talk about entrepreneurship and sustainable entrepreneurship as in new ventures, or in my case, I work with a lot of corporations challenging the status quo within large corporations, why not do it on public institutions, right? Or on social structures, right? We need to be entrepreneurial there too when we try to challenge what's going on. And so I think it has a lot of promises, but it certainly has a lot of challenges. But again, these challenges aren't that what we're talking about, how to overcome.
Thank you. Do you want to say something about what the others have said before I have a few questions and open up to the floor? Everything? Yes.
Yes. I get my mind stuck on professors and how to motivate people. And if you think about the education at the universities, people get very surprised that the education is very similar to what it was like 40 years ago. The teachers are still writing on the blackboard and just talking about the math and maybe not see. I have hard to imagine that the teachers come into the classroom and think, today I'm going to inspire the students, and just writing the math on the blackboard. And you're talking about the push from the professors. So I have a question for you guys. How can we motivate the teachers to motivate the students?
Excellent question. Tobias. And then you'll follow up, Tobias.
So no, I think it's a really good point. And when you say motivate, I'm sure most teachers think about that quite a lot. But what I meant was really, we can bring in some real problems, some real world problems. And when we collaborate with teachers who run courses on that, they are very motivated by that. They think it's a great idea, or some think it's a great idea. And of course, it depends on the class. But in general, I think they're pretty open to saying, yes, sure, let's bring in some real world problems, some organization that wants or needs our help.
Tobias, how can you motivate your students to be motivated?
Well, I agree. I think it's a difference if you have, starting courses at university, perhaps. It might be a different thing. I don't know. I have the luck to have my teachers were very motivated. But I was in a new study program where everybody wasn't used and people were doing it for the first time. I think the sad story is that the incentives at the university promotes repetition. right? It promotes that you do the same thing over and over again every year, and there's a quality criteria for how you do that. And so that creates stability and rigidity into the system, and probably that's where we have to work on it to promote also initiative taking rather than repetition.
I was thinking, Christina, you had before a long experience from the private sector running this network in around responsible business for and sort of corporate social responsibility and so forth. Now moved into the more sort of the academic setting, the university. So what do you see the challenges there? I mean, what can they learn from the business sector in implementing and becoming more sort of integrating sustainability in the fabric and the courses and so forth at the university, the business school in your case?
When I look at the Estonian environment, then I see that one of the other problems or challenges is how to leave people who actually really love what they do, whether they are scientists or entrepreneurs, in where they are, and at the same time make them cooperate so that they don't have to become something they're not. So how to support that the people who are passionate about something can create in that role, and then how to also support these parties equally. Not that entrepreneurs take all the money and build a business separately, but bring academia to inside the business and make it a part of this ecosystem, and also reward accordingly. And that's, I think, the shift we're going possibly through during the following years. I hope so. I think it's really, really necessary, and that could enliven and make academia more relaxed. They don't need to become entrepreneurs, because many academics don't want to become entrepreneurs. When they're forced to, they become so, if they need money or something like that. But I don't think that should be supported. I think that entrepreneurs should be entrepreneurs and academia should be academia, and they should cooperate accordingly. That's, I think, the central point that we should. And it becomes like a question of management culture again. Like, what kind of cooperation we support in general. So, yeah.
Right, thank you. I was thinking about Christian. You're coming from the business. You're representing the businesses in this sense. So, from your perspective, then, what when you're going to hire people and your company now going to grow and become one of these big companies solving the sustainability problems in your case, in particular, water cleaning. But what do you expect the universities and the higher education to deliver when it comes to skills and competences, both around entrepreneurship and sustainability?
Good question. I think, well, many businesses want to have people that are knowledgeable or have knowledge about the real world, real settings. So I'm really into I mean, from our own experience from universities, I really missed out, or really missed that the industries were involved heavily in the programs. So when we really look for, if and when we are looking for people directly from the universities, we really want to see problem-solving abilities when it comes to sustainability, understanding that there is an economical side, environmental side, and a social side or ethical side to all the businesses, because it's much more complex than what's on paper. So, but I really think that problem solving and having some kind of real life experience is really a key if you're coming directly from the universities.
Any questions? Yes, go ahead. And then you're next.
Yes, I hear that we talk about, often we talk about this sustainability and what it means as something you have to define yourself as an entrepreneur. And you also talk about, I think Tobias, you mentioned that this is a good space to learn, is when you are really in a space where you don't really have all the answers. But I think that creates a problem, which is also related to how do we then define sustainability? Because if it becomes very vague, if everybody define it differently, and then we can't really measure the progress of the process towards creating achieving a green transition. How would you address that in your educational efforts?
So just to be clear, when I said that, I was referring to how you do things, right? Not how do you define sustainability, but how you progress and how you take on the challenges in the initiative that you drive, or how you take on management in a corporation or external stakeholders that need to deal with. Those are tricky issues, but they have less to do with the definition of sustainability, right? But one of the things that I think is critical related to your question is how we define what good looks like in a certain situation. And if you try to be innovative in what you do, you probably need to be innovative how you measure the progress of what you do too, right? And those for different things. I'm sure, Christian, when you built up your company, that you needed to define how you measured progress in your company. Maybe that was different than your competitors if you were innovating what you did, right? So and that's a skill that you also need to learn.
Yeah, and I acknowledge also that it's a different solution when it's a business related problem. Then I think I agree. It makes really good sense to learn in that way. But the way we talk about it is also about, okay, so how do we then address this at an educational level to make more or less a standard for how we measure it?
Yes, go ahead. Comment very quick. No, it's an awesome question. And I think what you're looking at right now is the big battle of how do we decide what is the right way to measure it. And there's so many different voices in that, both from the science side, but also from the business side, and from certainly from public affairs and so on and so forth. But I wanted to say, actually, one of the motivations for the short workshop that Het was mentioned this morning, which was about a short workshop on sustainability for entrepreneurs, for startups. One of the motivations was really, some people will come with a sustainability idea, saying, no, we're on this business, that's all good. This course was really also motivated because we saw that some came and said, we've got a great business idea. And we said, yeah, yes, but at some point somebody will ask you, what's your sustainability profile? How are you going to answer that question? And actually what the course is also preparing them for is, there's not one simple answer to that. Because different, if you're talking to a particular kind of investor, they want to look at it from one angle, another investor will have another answer. So you mentioned it yourself, you need to be agile in the way you look at these. But at the moment, there is no clear, this is the only way we calculate sustainability. There's a big battle for that question.
Christian, and then we'll move on to the next question. Yes.
Yeah, on the same path, we're trying to define sustainability, to try to measure it. I think what we're saying here is sustainability is a set of skill sets you need to apply to real-life problems to try to solve them economically, socially, environmentally. And that can be applied to finding sustainable materials, or finding the right people, or finding or creating a business model that is long-term sustainable. So I think in the same way, I mean, we need to look at it on an entrepreneurial side. It's more of us. Entrepreneurs are master scenario builders. They are analysts. We don't need to be the tech expert, but what we look at is a progression of successes, or progression of the business we are building with a certain set of skill sets, and sustainability is part of that kind of skill set, I would say. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Ines Alaur, Linköping University and the University of Southeastern Norway. A bit teasing comment to you, Jeppe, about these pioneers. Do you think that such phenomena as entrepreneurship and sustainability didn't change roles from teachers to students being motivators? Aren't they motivating us as the teachers to give them energy and continue? And one of examples that we have heard today from this Estonian example when they said, yeah, we don't want to be sustainable. And if mentor says, you have to be, but they say, no, we are uncomfortable with that. Don't you think that this border is not as clear now? Who is the motivators in the game?
I think that, of course, students are motivators, definitely. I think most teachers go to work and think that they hope to have a great interacting class with their students and get motivated by their enthusiasm, definitely. But I don't think that was what was in the comment here. I think it goes both ways, of course, definitely. And I'm not sure what you meant by that it's changed roles. I think it goes both ways.
I think I just wanted to underline that we are no longer, this just the teacher and student. We are kind of this exchange, and we are like customer oriented, and students actually can say, this we want, and we have to follow.
Let's take another question.
Just a bit curious. I mean, it's been really good to listen, to the master programs that have been started and so on. But what will the next step be? Usually when these things happen, do you see you will get sustainable entrepreneurship education? Will it also lead to sustainable entrepreneurship research? And is the goal to get the identity to become a discipline like physics or economics? Or is there another way to create the identity that it's a bit novel?
Who wants to jump on that question?
I can. School of Entrepreneurship at Chalmers has been there for 25 years. So it's an institution within Chalmers, right? It's very established, and the corporate entrepreneurship track that I'm responsible for, it's been there now for 9 years. So in the context, it's stable, right? In the context, it has an identity. But to be frank, for me personally, I'm not that hung up on whether the field of sustainable entrepreneurship becomes its own field as long as we get things done, right? We're going to be left to history to define whether that happened or not. I think it has real. I think there's a risk of anything when as soon as you start talking about something. Like, I did stuff in the media industry, and media researchers, they want to include everything under the media, right? They can look at any issue as long as they put the table etiquette media on it. And the risk is that we do the same thing, right? So I'm guessing it's more important that we focus on the topical stuff, and then we are left to for others to define what we did.
The renewable rather comes with the identity from bringing in things happening. So in sustainability, it's obvious, of course. When you look to climate and all this, but it's not coming from like in a normal discipline, or no, I shouldn't call it normal. Like in an old discipline, it's coming from the research progressing.
I'm sure the others can answer this better than I do, but I'm assuming that everything needs to be sustainable in the end, right? So maybe that term will start to first diffuse and then become unimportant, because that's going to be the general tendency of everything.
Now I have many hands up here. First, were you, Emily?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of really interesting perspectives. I'm curious about, up until sustainability became a big topic, we talked about entrepreneurial university, how to move universities forward and sort of mobilize the potential that was within the entrepreneurial university concept. Do you think that universities are too slow in picking up the challenge? Because I think it's becoming very evident that if you look at just on sustainability and the green transformation, part of what was also in the recommendations of the NordSEnt was this need to have more quality, to have maybe good role models. Everything is really there within addressing sustainability. So do they sort of claim the space quickly enough in really being the hub that merges business needs and sort of problem owner needs like municipality to address climate change? Shouldn't they push for that and maybe push for a more central role there as knowledge institutions? And then maybe take the discussion on what is entrepreneurship and have it as a parallel but not intertwined discussion. So I'm just thinking sometimes we have a lot of knowledge and insights of how university can be these key hubs that will be central to solving the sustainability crisis. And we have a lot of knowledge of how to do it, but it seems that we're not moving fast enough as a university.
Is the train leaving and the universities are behind, and that's not driving sort of the sustainability challenge? Yes.
I can give it a go. You know, when you put on a bandwagon like I am to support a particular agenda within a university, of course, you always think things are moving too slow. Can we push things faster and so on? But on the other hand, I must say that, at least from where I'm sitting, we are moving things, and things are moving ahead. And it's not only moving ahead because we defined the strategy, not at all. Actually, there's just this big push from below, from students, in fact, that are saying, look, we want to see this happening. Why don't you put this particular thing on the agenda? Celine just mentioned we only have one or two talks on sustainability, but if you want more, I'm sure you will say, look, we need to discuss this more, we need to spend more time. So I think the push is coming both from sort of top and political, but certainly also from below.
For me, it's hard to be in any discussion at Chalmers without sustainability coming up as an issue. But at the same time, we built these structures to be very stable, right? To have high quality criteria, to fill them all with content that we have carefully thought about and that we think that students need, etc. And we built in inertia into the system for how to change it. And we did that very consciously, carefully and consciously. And we might say that, you say, oh shit, now it's too troublesome to change. Well, we designed it as such, right? And then we have to we have to take the consequences of that. So I think it's moving, but I think it's moving in steps, right? And I think one key aspect, and so I come from the strategy side, and one thing you change with strategy is how you change what you put attention to, and you change how you talk about it. And I think that change is happening very evidently, and I think the structures will follow.
Okay, I want to ask, I have several questions. You keep those to the next panel, please, because otherwise, but also, do you, Lovisa, Christian, have something to add to what's been said around these topics? Otherwise, I have a final question for all of you. Sort of one thing, the most important thing in your mind to move forward this thing, sort of the sustainability and entrepreneurship potential marriage. What would be that coming back to what Colette Henry said in the earlier days, sort of that's one thing to do that you can do yourself to move this forward. Either it could be on a personal level or on your sort of professional role. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I will go. I think we've spoken about natural environment a lot. I think first of all to start with understanding what are the planetary boundaries and where the most crucial issues lie. But then also not forget social and governance aspects in doing that. So not to create new problems while solving environmental problems. I think that's just to address the right issues would be the first place to start.
Who wants to go next?
I can.
Okay, Louisa.
Okay, I want to say to everybody on an organizational level, don't just stop at making policies, and don't try to sit down and think about how you're already fulfilling your policies, but actually try to change towards the policy that you've made. And I mean, we know some things about what's right and what's wrong, But I think the most important thing is that we try to get more momentum. As your question said, it's very, very slow. If the school wants to do a change, that we want to be more sustainability, it's like minimum 3 years. And take help from the student unions, because the students are much faster than the universities. So you need them.
Okay, next. Christian, or do you want to go last? Or?
Yeah, no, I can take the next. Okay, what is the one key thing?
One thing that
for
on a
entrepreneurs?
personal level, entrepreneurship, sustainability.
I think that focus on what you're good at on an individual level, bring in sustainability to it, because one person can't do everything, and I think that is the key. We do what we can. Great.
Yep.
I've said this already, but I think one of the strong drivers for change is actually, as you're saying, maybe not the universities, but some of the companies that we work with are very strong drivers, and we think we should keep on inviting them in and showing us, what kind of push they put on this agenda, because that's inspiring to us.
And finally, Tobias.
So one thing I do is also I do the big courses in change, and one of the problems there is to find, because I do case studies, and one of the problems is to find the really good cases, and you want the cases to be to lead up to a certain kind of discussion. And so what I'm doing, and I'm cheating here because it's not something new I'll do, but the thing I'm doing is I'm trying to find new cases that have to do both with even more environmental and social aspects, but they are hard to find. But I'm going to do a better job of looking.
So I have a suggestion to you. Write them yourself. And with that...
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And and it's actually Nordic berries, just to set the stage for this. And there you go. And you already got one, so you can't get not another one. So... moving on to our second panel, I would like to ask Jannike Borg, Lisa Eriksson, Leander Hessner, and Birte Lund to come up on the stage. And if you were quite attentive in the previous panel, they, to some extent, answered the questions that I addressed, and we'll see if that's going to be the same case for this panel. Let me first start with introducing the 4 panelists. First, we have, I'm going from my direction here, so Jannike Borg. She's a sustainability advocate and a founder of Acera, a startup that's focusing on environmental building. And then we have Leander Hessner. He's the co-founder of Decamil, and they are creating a sustainable protein supplement from the shore crab. And then we have Birte Lund. She's a professor at the Department of Culture and Learning at Aalborg University. And then finally, we have Lisa Eriksson, head of the Innovation Support Department, KTH, at the Royal Institute of Technology. So there we go. Oops. And in this case, there are 2 questions. On a more sort of a meta level, on the organization level, how can sustainability be integrated in all of the university activities? And we touch upon that a little bit in the previous discussion this afternoon. And then also, what role do incubators, innovation offices, and such as organizations that are in the university setting play in increasing the focus on sustainable entrepreneurship? So we'll do the same procedure as last time. They have 2 minutes each to start off, and then we'll open up for a dialogue and questions. I use the clock for these. So, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Well, I will open up by saying that I have 3 words for you: ethics, values, and maturity. Ethics, first of all, is the stance that all universities need to take in order to define what is right and what is wrong. And sustainability, how we've been talking about it today, is still, even though that NTNU created a master's program, or the Estonian business school developed a a green stream transition, it's still this odd silo, and it is within every university. And that's why we talk about ethics, because when it comes to sustainability, you actually need to define what is right and wrong. And it's really hard for all of us right now because we do not have the measures. But when we have worked with former paradigms, like Industry 4.0, we didn't have all the answers. We just thought that the technological side of robot technology was freaking cool, and it could provide some efficiency to the industry in some way. Did we have all the answers? No, but we did it anyway because it was interesting, because we saw that it could foster change that could solve some of the issues that we had from a technological perspective. But when it comes to sustainability, you can't feel the need, you can't feel the actual direct effect on your body. You can't see it on the industrial hallways one-on-one, and that's why it's hard to make it tangible. That brings me to the values, and that's why all universities need to readdress and reassess what attitude they have towards learning. Because when you enter a university, I'm sorry, I'm going to make this short. When you enter a university, then you buy into a package of knowledge, like you buy a milk in the grocery store. It's the exact same thing, but that will form your worldview. So you need to take that into account, and the maturity level. I'll give you 10 more seconds. Yes. And in terms of the maturity level, there are 4 levels basic of sustainability. We're still talking about the definition of it. Well, it is very well defined. And it's been matured since 1987, since the Brundtland report came out, and we need to assess where we are and where we want to be in terms of ethics on that maturity and ambition level as well. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Leander.
Yes. Okay, so what universities can do to foster sustainability, I'd say, and I come from the natural sciences, I'm a marine biologist, I would say that the universities could help foster creativity in the natural sciences better. Because we're taught during our whole education that there's lots of wrongs and there are only a few rights, especially in calculus and stuff like that. Was never really my deal, but that's how I ended up here, I guess. Yeah, to create spaces where we can, as blooming scientists, allowed to be creative, basically, and think in a different way than we do during all of our courses. Because that's basically how all these ideas start. And it's something that has to be taught to students of natural science, because not many are essentially creatively gifted always. So if you create spaces where you can help foster creativity and nurture that creativity within the students, I believe that the sustainability and the entrepreneurship side will come automatically afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much. And yes, Peter.
The question was, how can sustainability be integrated in all universities' activity? And I come from Aalborg University, and it's defined as a mission-driven university. And if you're sent on a mission about sustainability, it means that actually that the subject should be introduced as a theme in all subjects. And since we are a PBL university, it means that the students sort of choose what problem to address. And since we also is a research-based university, then the teachers are addressing what they want to study. So there is a schism there about the freedom and the force to be sustainable. So we have to be aware of that. If we make it mandatory to address sustainability, what I think should be done, then it's a cultural change as well. I think we should evoke students' curiosity and develop their action competence. It's very important. And what I have worked with in my program, I'll tell about that tomorrow, I introduce sustainability as a mandatory aspect in the students' internship where they should deal with the subject. And I try to create interest and enthusiasm by both colleagues and management. And it's not given. People are not just happy when you say address sustainability. It's the most important things in the world. We can't survive if we don't. And another question was, how could we introduce other part of the university? And I think that innovation office should be integrated in the program. And I had invited in entrepreneurship teachers into my study too, because there's a more another kind of pedagogy, and I'm very much interested in the pedagogy and involving students. So I think to make it mandatory and to make it interesting.
Great, thank you very much. Lisa.
Okay. So I've been listening in here the part of the afternoon. I haven't been here the entire afternoon, but it seemed like you have talked a lot about entrepreneurship education here. And first, I would like, there are a session about KTH in the report, and that's about the master program that we have and some other courses. But what I do and what I represent as being the head of the innovation support department at KTH is that we have a very open program that is open to all. Everything we do is extracurriculum activities. And annually we support around 350 to 400 new teams with their ideas. They can enter into an open program, they can enter into some specific programs if they want to go for a startup or if they just want to discover possibilities in the research together with colleagues and so on. So it's very, very open, and I think it's universities, there are few other places in our society that are so good breeding grounds for innovation and creativity as universities. And I think universities need to actually take more action to become that platform instead of focusing only on kind of research and education, and you need to do a specific course for this, and there's application, because there is so much creativity out there. And if you mix people, we have pitching context. Teachers pitch their ideas together with students. We have some of our students over there. So you know that it's a very open environment and also open to society. KTH has the strength of being in the center of Stockholm, of course, but we have a really booming startup ecosystem here. Invite them to campus. And many of them are also alumni. And I think building this very open, creative and collaborative environment is a key to success. And what we have seen is that sustainability is very integrated. It's a part of the DNA, I would say, at the university, but it's also in all the support that we give. It's kind of all the templates and the tools that we have developed. Sustainability is integrated. It's not seen as a separate stream. And what we can see is that 75% of all the teams that we do support actually have a clear connection to any of the sustainability, and a positive connection to any of the sustainability development goals. And then it's also, it's none, I would say, is kind of clear negative. Then we will kind of nudge them to a different direction. But I think it's, as many of you have talked about here, I think universities need to kind of step up and become that platform to a larger extent than what we do today.
I'll do the same thing I did yesterday. Do you want to comment on each other to begin with, or otherwise I know I have 3 budding questions from the last session that they probably fit into this panel as well. Okay. Is your question still relevant for this panel?
Yeah, why not? My name is Tommy Larsson Segerlind from Södertörn University in south part of Stockholm here. I'm a program director for a bachelor program, Entrepreneurship, Innovation and Market. And my question is related to that because in Sweden we often have these kinds of entrepreneurship and these kinds of education on a master level or PhD level, and because they argue that it's too complex for students on bachelor level, so that's why we have it on these levels. But we have some, I saw this in Estonia, we had this on bachelor level, it seems to be, but my question is, how can we create this kind of programs or educations that actually introduce this from day one at the bachelor level, and then to advanced level and so on, and how can we help each other to develop that?
Jannike, want to start?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question. I think it's important, as you said, collaborative with the existing business environment, take in the good examples already, foster them as they're already doing at Chalmers, I can hear. Put down what I would frame or term as a youth board. Take in students, take in externals, take in the professors that are actually moving this agenda. Put them together and let them co-create. Because I'm sure with their knowledge and their skills and their competences, they will make something that you can use. And there are an excessive amount of tools out there already existing, just waiting to be used. A lot of entrepreneurship programs. Okay, how many of you are still using the business model canvas in here? Who? That was created in 2008. We have had a million different tools since then when developing business models. The triple-layered business model canvas is also outdated. It's not even used anymore because it's still the silo structure of the triple bottom line that John Elkington created in 1992 and that he took back because everybody misunderstood it as silos. But it starts with reframing the way we see development and change, because we need the systems thinking. And I love the slide with the 4 different systems thinking, complexity, and there were like 4 principles that Aarhus University had sort of found. Brilliant. Start with that 4 principles and work your way from there.
Anyone want to add something to that before I take the next question?
I think if you want the students to come up with new entrepreneurial ideas, it's important that they have a few years of studying to actually be able to apply their newfound knowledge in a field. And if you want to start earlier, I think it might be important that you give the students case studies or something to start off from, instead of asking them to come up with their very own thing from the first year, perhaps. I think that would at least be my experience if I would have started right off the bat when I started at the university. I think that might have been overwhelming because I couldn't apply any knowledge of biology because I didn't have any to begin with, right? So I think that's at least worth thinking about.
Just one comment, because what I'm not really. I think we need to discuss progression because, and as you said, we can't just have different kinds of business model canvas courses stapled on each other. So I think we need to start very early, and that's my question: how can we do that?
We have many hands up here, so now we're going to have short questions, crisp and succinct answers, and so we can get through as many as possible. Yes, Signe.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but I think it's to answer for the next step, and also about the reframing part, which I think is really, really important. Maybe the universities, and especially within entrepreneurship, I think we are a bit late in terms of implementing sustainability. But for the rest of the world outside the university, we have heard about it for a long, long time. Me, myself, I'm new into the whole entrepreneurship world, so it was kind of surprising that it was not implemented better than it is today. So I think one of the next steps is about getting it implemented without saying it all the time. Like not especially with entrepreneurship, where you pitch your idea or you are building your business your business case. Don't say the word sustainability. Don't say that you are a green business case. Like you need to tell what you want to do, what is your vision, and then the audience and whoever you talk with on the streets, they are the ones that should say, "Oh wow, you are sustainable." And I think that's the goal we need to try to implement.
So just do it and the world will understand.
Yep.
Okay. I think take another question. I think you are first back there. Yes. Please introduce yourself also.
All right. So good evening, everyone. My name is Warda, and I am a graduate of Masters of Innovation and Entrepreneurship from University of Wollongong, Australia. And currently, I'm pursuing my PhD in Management at ISM University, Lithuania. So when I saw this title, I was very interested to join, and I think I did a good choice. So it's my perspective, like once upon a time, back in 2019, when I graduated as a master's student of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. It's a suggestion, or you can say maybe we can ponder on it from a university perspective, from a academic or curriculum perspective, that we are teaching entrepreneurship, or it is being taught by the academics and professors who have never been entrepreneurs by themselves. Whereas entrepreneurship itself is a very experience-based, hardcore, I would say, industry experience-based field. So I think we need to fill up that gap somehow. Now, those entrepreneurs cannot be academics. It's not a theory-based thing which we can just go and teach to someone. Another thing which I have always pondered upon, like I think some 25, 30 years back, there was a lot of debate in academia that leaders are born or leaders can be built. I think we are coming back to the same debate that these entrepreneurs are born or they are being built up based on the education and all. So there's a lot that we have to fill those gaps from the education perspective. And last 2 cents of mine, going through all this education, what I've learned, whether you are innovating, whether you are an entrepreneur, it's all based on problem solving. And when your problem, you have to prioritize which problem needs to be solved, which will bring more sustainability to the society, to the environment, and of course then to the business. So upstream thinking and solution-based thoughtfulness, which we can integrate in the secondary school system or something, so that we can maybe have more entrepreneurs in future. Okay. So how do you think that we can fill up that gap?
Britta has the answer.
No, I don't think I have the answers, but I don't think it's about problem solving isolated. It's very much about problem definition and understanding what the problem is about. And sometimes the more knowledge you have and the mixed knowledge you have, the more ideas you get. So you develop your imagination while you are trying to define a problem. And we have heard today that sometimes you figure out that you might have found the right solution for the wrong problem. So the whole process about problem definition is something that you have to learn from your small kid. You have to learn to think about that way. And in that way you also learn to handle insecurity and being aware of that the problems are not given, problems are created and defined.
Any others on the panel that want to quickly comment?
Then we're back to the knowledge package that you buy when you choose an education. Because when you buy that sort of knowledge package, or in some countries they're given, basically, that forms the ethical world view that you will build your career and your life around. And that's why it's so essential that universities actually pick up the pace, so to say, from the rest of the world that's known about this for ages, and actually start to move along. Because I've been a consultant for and mentor and tutor for gymnasium and preschool and kids. They know more about the SDGs than the university does. That's a critical factor, because that comes back to how will universities compete with the market in the future? Because when the market knows more about the best competitive edge than the university, they're not selected. Then they will choose another career path. And that's what we're starting to see with Generation Z, X?
Z.
Alpha. Wow, Alpha. it goes so fast, right?
Yeah.
No, yeah. But that's what we're starting to see with the new generation. More and more go into, you know, tangible educations again. That's a good thing, though. We talk too much about strategy.
Yeah.
We need to get hands-on and start executing instead.
Yes, you had a question or a comment.
Hello, good evening. So I really enjoyed the conversation, and my quick question is, like, entrepreneurs have been there since last 10,000 years of human progress, even without the without the universities also, because passionate people will always be there in the society and they will always find their way out. And if they have perseverance, definitely they will succeed. But my major question was, like, all these things which were mentioned before, like critical thinking, system thinking, problem framing, individual initiative, all of these I never got into being part of my curriculum in bachelor's as well as till master's level. And standardization of academics, like all the previous batches, including our batch, is solving same kind of assignments. They're solving same kind of problem. They're working on same kind of study material. They're reading same kind of lecture notes also, far from like even books we used to read. Now we just read lecture notes. So we are creating maybe well-trained minds which are ready for jobs. But here the role of a university should come into to create next level entrepreneurs. That comes from problem definition, statement solving. So that is what I think is lacking in most of the curriculum, and what will lead to maybe like universities may be the monasteries of the past. It may become irrelevant in next few years. Recently, yesterday, like General Motors told like they don't need a university degree. Similarly, Google, Facebook, they don't have a university degree. So what role do you think of universities have to play now?
Yes. Who wants to bite that?
So the question was, what role will the universities have in the future?
Yeah, regarding creating these minds which can actually solve creative problems, because next level problems will be even tougher, like what we face today.
I think, as you point out, of course, it's important to learn those traits, and it probably differs also what kind of topic you study at the universities. But of course, as I said also in the beginning, I think that the universities also they need to step up. And not but, and to take a larger role, because as we feel that the students and researchers that we support in this program, it is extracurriculum activities, and it's a point that it actually is, because this is not something they have to do. This is something they have identified a problem that they kind of have pain of, and then actually want to try to solve this program, and to do this while they are studying or doing research in this environment where you have people from cross sectors from all over the world spending time at our campus areas. That's kind of the best place to be, and I think that's why universities, I think the future of the university is that we need to be more platforms, not only this educational kind of ivory towers and focusing too much only on the research and education. We need to be platforms, and we need to connect with society, and then you will get all these things. As a student, when I studied, this was 25, 30 years ago, so it was a long time ago, and entrepreneurship and innovation wasn't that big then. You talked about småföretagsforskning. We actually have had the same job once while. So, the reason then was that what I did, so I was very involved in the student union and did a lot of work like that, and that's what actually taught me a lot of the things about leadership and so on that I brought into my professional work. So I think universities are much more, we are platforms instead of this, sorry.
Agreed.
Well, a lot of questions and running out of time, but we'll take a few more. Yes.
Yeah, just a question. Like, I agree with you. I think we have to move towards principles rather than focusing on the tools and even SDGs. I mean, SDGs is a great way to direct our focus, maybe help us to as a framework for guidance. But the question is, what happens after we reach the goals, right? I mean, the idea of sustainability, that it should always be sustainable. Once we have arrived the goal, we have to sustain what we have arrived. This is why principles is of importance. So what is your reflection on using SDGs as? I mean, it seems that everyone nowadays is using it as the key framework.
I try to use this in my course as an introduction where the students are presented for the different 17 of these goals, and they have to work with them and then address it. What could it mean in their practice? And we talked about what's the role of the university. I think that the role of the university should be, in German you call it Bildung and Danning and Dannelse. So I think that the most important thing is that you have a qualified basic for taking ethical discussion. So I think it's not practical. It's ethical discussion about what's a good life, what's quality, and so we completely agree on that.
I'll have time for one more question. I think it was you asked so many, so you'll. I'm the boss here. So I'll let you, Melina.
Thank you. Should we share? Thank you so much for the presentations and for the thoughts. And I just had a quick thought about all the system. You know, we're asking the students to think in systems and to be critical and all that. But when we think about it, we want universities to change and become platforms, but they are also part of a system. They are, they have a lot of metrics that they have to, are measured up to, and when those don't change, universities don't change. I mean, when push comes to shove, and when budget needs to be cut, you don't ask about, okay, so which one is more sustainable, of the programs? Oh, no, it's where do they get hired? How much do they get paid? What is their, income at the end of the program? I mean, how do we make sure, how do we do that? How do we change the metrics? How do we change the whole system the university is in so that they can become these spaces of creativity and okay to fail, everything else? Thank you.
A fairly simple question to sort of round up the panel with.
Yeah. So how do we change the financial system? That's basically what you're asking, right? So why is it all about money, right? Well, I can tell you one thing that won't change. I was so naive for a couple of years that I was like, I'm going to change the whole financial system. We're going to talk about integrated economics and the violin is playing. Right now, we're in a negotiation with one of the biggest banks in Denmark about creating a new payment model for private consumers to buy sustainable housing. So the model that we're making. Because we reduce, compared to conventional residential building, a CO2 emission by 70%. So that's kind of a lot, right? But right now, green loans is on par with conventional loans. How the why? That shouldn't make sense, because the green loans pull into the ESG report and actually makes value of the bank go up. The conventional makes it go down. So there is actually, again, a system there. So we're trying to tap into that now and see if we can change. And I can tell you this, it's not going to be tomorrow. but it's like starting the conversation and taking the small steps and trying to redefine. So we made a whole new financial model. And we're 2 people in the company right now. And going up against one of the biggest banks, we have talked to one, which were supposed to be the most sustainable one. And they were like, construction is not our focus. Okay, but it's 40% of the national emission. What the? So, right? But it is trying to do it. It is innovating, coming up with the ideas and trying to push back on the system. And I believe it's the same within the university.
Any other comments to that?
I was just saying, of course, it is always challenging with budgeting in the academic world, of course, but as soon as you start treating it as this is the way how we do business, this is the way how we work, and you integrate it, then it's kind of even a cut. If you need to cut your budget, you will not only cut the kind of the sustainability initiatives because they are integrated in all of them. So I think, yeah, it is challenging, but I think as soon as you start thinking of it is this is the way how we do business. It is, of course, when you produce a product, you need to think about also how you make it, so it will be able to reuse it and to recycle it and so on. And if that mindset gets into all the things that you do, I think it's, of course, it will more evenly be cut as but yeah, in Swedish we call this osthyvel, like you just take a certain percentage of all of it.
I remember when people were laughing their head off when I was against nuclear power, and some few idealists was making a windmill in Denmark. They were laughing like you never could understand how ridiculous it was to put these two up like Goliath. And what's the biggest industry now? It is actually the windmill. So it just takes time, and some days they will realize that.
Well, time flies, and we are getting into the go. I want to spend 3 more minutes for you all 4 to then answer the question about, as Colette Henry mentioned to the previous panel, about sort of on the professional side or your personal side, what is a small step that you will take, maybe even tomorrow, this week, in sort of the sustainability path. Who wants to go first?
Yeah,
Lisa?
I can start. So this week, then I can actually do some marketing about an initiative that we actually take place this week, is that KTH is partnered to something called the Global Change Award, which is a public-private partnership together with the H&M Foundation and the Accenture. And each year, this is the 7th year, we do that. It's a global innovation challenge on how to solve the sustainability in the fashion and apparel industry. And this year is actually the Acceleration Week here in Stockholm. So we have there were more than 7,000 entries, I think, from the entire world, and we picked the top 5 ones. And this week we are supporting them and developing them and to reach their goals. So that's what I will do this week.
Self-promotion is fine. Birte?
Yeah, I think I already had done it by making the course that I'm talking about tomorrow, because I have seen that it created much more interest around my students for sustainability. So if and someone even called me, I didn't like your course, but I changed my habits. So
Excellent.
I guess tomorrow I will outcompete the soy industry for protein for the agriculture sector with my company. I think that's what I'll do. Yeah.
Good.
That's nice.
That's good.
And Jannike, finally?
I'm going to raise money so that in 4 years we are responsible for 1.3% of the national emission in Denmark being cut down from construction, and so that we can cut in budgets, health budgets, also by building healthier buildings.
Good. Thank you very much. And here, hopefully, some sustainable candy, chocolate. There you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And with this, it's time to, I'm just going to say thank you today to all the presenters, the panelists, the participants here and online. And with that, I'm going to hand the word over to Helene Torgensson that will give you instructions for dinner.
Yes, thank you, Magnus, and thank you all. I just want to remind you that dinner is served at 6 p.m. in Iva's magnificent dining room, Bankettsalen. You go up the stairs close to the reception, and I'll be there in a minute and show you where to go.
Thank you very much.